Deku was born with two powers. One was a clear ice quirk, but the other power he can't use often. He doesn't know what the second power is, but one day he awakened his power in the Villain League invasion. His eyes became purple with a ring and tomos. In this video, we are going to see what if Deku awakens his Rinnegan. As you know, for more, please leave a like, share, and comment down your thoughts and feedback. And you can support me on my Patreon. Link in description.
The gates of UA looked like the mouth of a myth, polished, gleaming, and hungry for every hope that came near. Midoriya Izuku stood in its shadow, flexing frozen breath through his teeth. His palms steamed cold, a frost veil trembling over his fingers as he whispered to himself, "Focus. 5-meter spread, no overfreeze, control over power." His quirk, Icecraft, wasn't the flashiest. He couldn't blanket a city in an avalanche like the pro giants on TV. But he'd carved finesse into it. Needle ice, lattices that caught light, skate rails that pivoted on a whisper. He trained himself to be a scalpel where others brought hammers. When present mic's speakers blasted the cue, examinees surged forward. Izuku lowered into a runner's stance. He drew the cold into his bones, exhaled, and let thin skate blades grow from beneath his shoes. With a push, he slid, humming over pavement like a note on glass, toward the mock city where metal villains slept. They didn't sleep for long. 3-pointer down the boulevard. Izuku flicked his wrist, and a spiral of ice thread shot out, curving around rusted girders. He snagged a lamppost, slingshotting himself with a blur. The next hand motion brought up a tight ice screw, which he drilled into the robot's knee. One twist, one yank, metal screamed, joints seized, the bot pitched. Izuku slid under, sliced a seam across an exposed belt, and the head snapped free with a spark fizz. Points ticked somewhere unseen. He didn't look. He moved. He wall ran on ice filigree along a fallen billboard. He crafted stepping stones mid-air, thin as plates, strong as pride, leaping across alleys. He wasn't alone. A green-haired girl with frog-like leaps, Asuisuyu, his brain supplied, from pre-exam chatter, vaulted past him, tongue lash coiling a bot. Another examinee melted into paper-thin strands and stitched a robot shut with thread. Heroes to be were an orchestra of impossible. Sirens wailed, not the exams. The villains didn't belong. They weren't the painted hulks with score counters on their chassis. They were men and women in stolen masks and drab coats, sliding through the mock city with real weapons and wrong intent. Present Mike's voice cracked with alarm. Pro heroes blurred into motion to corral the chaos. The test warped. Suddenly not a game but a battlefield. A slender man in a mesh scarf, Shinya Kamihara, the hero edge shot, cleaved a path through the crowd, body folding into a needle-sleek thread that zipped and unfurled faster than sight. He was too far to save everyone. Izuku planted a heel. Frost zipped across the road in a pebbled rush, ice bramble, tripping a charging villain. He raised a mirror plate in front of a terrified examinee. A bullet sparked harmlessly off its frozen face. He counted breaths, counted beats. The city sang panic. "Ribbit, watch out," Suyu shouted. Izuku spun. A villain leveled a barbed spear cannon at her in the open. She leapt too far from cover, mid-arc, too exposed, nowhere to. Something in Izuku's chest folded inward like a star collapsing. The world slowed, color thinned, sound knelt, and his eyes, long dormant, long ignored, caught the light. A pattern like a ringed storm blossomed in his irises. Perfect circles, oldest violet, deeper than dusk. A sensation rose. Gravity that listened to his will. His hand snapped open. "Come here," space consented. Suyu jerked sideways as if pulled by an invisible tether. She flew toward him, wide-eyed, and Izuku stumbled backward as she slammed into his arms. The spear cannon fired where she'd been a heartbeat prior. Metal shrieked against stone, showering ghost sparks. Izuku's breath returned and ran wild. The violet rings in his eyes pulsed, then dimmed, leaving the aftertaste of lightning on the tongue. Suyu blinked at him from his chest. "Ribbit, thanks." "Why yet?" he stammered, setting her down. Sorry. That was, I don't know what." "Down," she croaked, yanking him as another shot screamed past. He flattened, swept a sheet of ice that reared up like a shield, and the shot hammered the frozen wall into powder. The villain reloaded. Shinya arrived like a thrown needle. He threaded along the cannon barrel, unfolded into a man, and chopped the attacker across the wrist. The weapon clattered. 2 pros flanked, cuffed, done. Safe zone. Now, A hero bellowed. Izuku guided Tsuyu, throwing up cover, skating them into the shadow of a reinforced transit shelter where staff were herding examinees. The chaos ebbed by increments. Villains were pinned, muzzled, or gone. Sirens softened. Present Mike's voice returned, strained but steady, promising safety, promising adjustments to scoring due to the incident. Izuku leaned against a pillar. His pulse thundered. His eyes felt heavy, overbright behind his lids, as if the violet had left embers. He didn't notice Shinya Kamihara standing 3 meters away, watching him not like a hero surveying a civilian, but like a swordsman measuring the first clean edge of a legend he'd heard only in whispers. Shinya's gaze tracked from Izuku's trembling hands to the boy's eyes, still rimmed the faintest star of violet. He exhaled through his nose, something like recognition flickering in the set of his mouth. Interesting, Shinya murmured, and a word older than Japan ghosted across his mind. Rinnegan. Night hooked itself across Musudafu, and in a small, soundproof training room beneath an agency with no sign, Midoriya Izuku stood in front of a target dummy, trying not to stare at his reflection in the window. The violet rings wouldn't come back on command. He tried in his room until his head hurt, pushing, pleading. Nothing. Only when he'd been certain Tsuyu would die had the power awakened, as if danger itself were the hand that flicked the switch. Breathe normally, Shinya said. He was dressed down. Black shirt, black slacks, no hero glamour. Even like this, he felt sharp, edges tucked into the calm. I'm not here to audition you for my sidekicks. I'm here to see you safely through what you don't yet understand. Izuku nodded, knuckles white around a water bottle. Sir, today, my eyes. Violet rings in concentric arrays. Shinya finished quietly. You pulled the girl across open space without touching her. Izuku swallowed. Yes. Shinya folded his arms. Do you know the word chakra? Izuku blinked. That's, like, from old shinobi folktales. Energy running through, tenketsu, acupuncture points? I read a paper last year about quirk energy conduits looking suspiciously like old chakra diagrams. A corner of Shinya's mouth quirked. You read interesting papers. He stepped closer, fingers steepling. What you used today is not a quirk as we define them. It's adjacent. There Avenue been rare reports through history, buried, ridiculed, misfiled, of eyes with rings that command force. My mother's stories weren't bedtime fancies. My ancestor supposedly served in a clan that wielded them. Most called it myth. Heroes called it misattributed telekinesis. I called it a thread that never broke. He let that sit. Izuku felt the room grow larger around the word ancestor, as if the past had walked in and pulled out a chair. Izuku, Shinya said, using his name like he'd always known it, I think you carry a power that runs parallel to quirks. It listens to danger. It respects will and focus and control. And if it is what I think, then it maps onto an older framework, chakra, that you can learn to manage. I'm prepared to teach you the base control practices. Quietly, you'll still attend UA. You'll still be tested by Aizawa. But when your eyes light violet, you won't be at their mercy. Izuku searched his face. Why me? Because you saved a classmate without thinking of yourself. Shinya said simply, because powers like that, if left to fear, break things they're meant to protect. And because, he added dryly, All Might doesn't know how to walk on water. Izuku's breath hitched into a laugh he hadn't expected. Is that really a thing? Shinya turned, tapped a tablet, and the wall unrolled a matte black mat with a soft whir. We start with a leaf. He produced a basket of crisp green leaves, bottled water, and a small towel, placing them with the ceremony of a tea set. The room, Izuku realized, was prepared. The kind of preparation that meant Shinya had decided long before tonight. 2 fundamentals, Shinya said. Leaf balance and surface walk. Leaf balance teaches you to direct chakra, your internal energy, precisely. Surface walk teaches you to bind that energy to external planes, walls, ceilings, water. Your ice quirk will try to help. That's good sometimes and a lie other times. You'll learn the difference. He placed a leaf on Izuku's forehead. Hold it, with intent. Don't clench. Don't freeze it there. Adhere it with will. Izuku went cross-eyed staring up. The leaf slid. He tensed instinctively and felt his palms frost. Shinya's hand hovered, palm down. A silent relax. Izuku breathed out. Inhale, exhale. He imagined a gentle current rising from his stomach up his spine to the point between his brows. The leaf trembled, stayed. A minute later it fell. 10 seconds later he kept it for 2 minutes. An hour later sweat glazed his temple, but the leaf clung whenever he asked and fell when he didn't. Good, Shinya said, handing him water. Now, wall. They moved to a high concrete panel. Shinya touched it, and his shoes whispered up the surface until he stood sideways like a margin note defying the page. He walked. He stood on the ceiling. Gravity blinked, confused, and shrugged. He dropped lightly back to the floor. Izuku's heart tried to leave his body out of excitement. He stepped up, focusing the same gentle stream into the soles of his feet. The first attempt stuck and then peeled him off like a sticker. He hit the mat, rolled, poorly, and groaned. The second attempt let him hang in a slow, impasse. Ble leaned for a breath before he slid off and laughed breathless. By the fifth attempt, he took 3 steps up before gravity reclaimed him. He lay there, grinning at the ceiling like it had winked at him. Again, Shinya said, but there was something like approval in the word. We'll go until you can take 10 steps. Then we sleep. Tomorrow, water. The word water made Izuku's icecraft hum inside him like a tuning fork. He imagined the fusion. Chakra binding to surface tension while his quirk froze eddies into footholds. 2 systems, 2 languages, becoming 1 voice. Shinya studied him for a long moment. One more thing. When danger spikes, your eyes answer. Until you have day-to-day access, we'll simulate risk, controlled, safe. The goal is to summon the violet without terror. He glanced at the dummy. And then we teach that power to whisper. Izuku's fingers drifted to his eyelids, imagining those rings. I want that, he said, and meant it with a clarity that surprised him. Shinya nodded once. Then we'll earn it. The training pool was a glossy tongue of black under the agency lights. Shinya stood at one end, arms folded. Izuku at the other, shoes off, nerves hot, feet cold. Water first, Shinya said. Then ice. Izuku inhaled and pointed chakra to his feet. The water's skin yielded then firmed like taut leather. He eased weight forward and took a step. The surface dipped slightly, cupping him. He took another step, laughter skipping out of him because he was walking on water. It lasted 3 steps. The 4th footfall broke the spell and he plunged with a yelp. He surfaced sputtering, cheeks burning, hair slapping wetly across his face. Shinya's expression didn't change. Again, they did it again, and again. Izuku found that if he pushed too hard, the water rejected him, too soft. And he sank. A conversation, not a command. 10 steps by noon, halfway by 1, across by 2. On the return, he tried something reckless. As he walked, he iced the water beneath each foot to leave faint footprints, transparent pads that melted as he lifted. 2 systems braided. It felt right. Shinya tossed him a blunted practice kunai. Hold water without looking, he said, and flicked his wrist. Izuku turned, caught the kunai on reflex, and his focus slid. The water took him. He plunged, then burst out laughing again because even failure felt like a victory when physics agreed to negotiate. They moved to push, pull. The legends call them Shinra Tensei and Bansho Tenon, Shinya said, writing the kanji with a marker on a whiteboard. Heavenly subjugation of the omnipresent God, universal pull of all creation. Pretty names for gravity tricks. Do not think of them as blasts. Think of them as a field that favors your choice. He set up a stack of phone blocks. Push. He gestured at a chalk line 6 meters away. From here, Izuku's eyes were normal, green, earnest. He centered breath, summoned that gentle stream, but the violet rings didn't appear. He held the feeling he remembered from the exam. A need like a commandment. Protect. Now. Move. The stack trembled. A breeze stirred. 1 block slid lazily and fell with the dignity of a bored cat. Shinya's mouth twitched. We'll take it. They layered drills. Izuku threw a block in the air and tried to nudge it mid-flight. He failed. He caught it with a spiral thread of ice instead and scowled at his own crutch. Shinya made him sit with the frustration, then had him write 3 pages in a notebook describing the exact qualia of the moment his eyes woke. The taste of copper, the hush of sound. The feeling of a cord tying him to Suyu. Naming a thing made it shareable with his nervous system. By dusk, he could push the block stack with a soft thump. The violet woke once like a blink, circles whispering into being. Power cresting, and for a single glorious second the blocks jumped as if the floor hiccuped. The rings faded. His head buzzed like he'd stood too fast. Good, Shinya said, offering water again. We stop when we can stop on a good note. They finished with silent movement. Shinya turned sideways and became a ribbon, folding himself down corridors and through keyholes in a dance that made reality nervous. Izuku couldn't do that, but he could match the principle, no wasted motion. He skated on thin ice rails only he could feel, fingertip to wall to ledge to floor, always with 3 points of balance. Never with heavy steps. Harrowing is often noise, Shinya said when they were cooling down, but saving is often quiet. Izuku thought of Tsuyu's breath against his chest when he'd pulled her. Quiet. He wrote that down later, circling it twice. That night, on his desk, the page filled with a new heading. Rinnegan, notes. Feels like a FL-D answering a question I'm allowed to ask only when it's urgent. Push, pull is easier when I imagine protecting, not attacking. Ice plus chakra equals adhesion plus scaffolding. Don't let ice be the only pillar. My body gets tired in a different way. Brain tired. Plan for limits. He fell asleep with the notebook open, breath slow. A leaf perched on his forehead like a little green medal. The UA letter hummed from the screen. Principal Nezu's voice rice grain cheerful as it delivered the verdict. Accepted. Not just accepted. Accepted with commendation for, during the untimely incident, demonstrating heroism consistent with UA's values. Izuku clapped a hand over his mouth and made a noise somewhere between a laugh and a sob. His mother hugged him tight enough to compress stars. I knew it, she cried, then added with ferocity, be safe, as if she could staple safety to his blazer. On entrance day, Class 1A's door loomed comically large. Inside, Bakugo bristled like a fuse and Todoroki was a cool storm, while Tsuyu, lifted a hand and gave him a small frog smile. He returned it, warmth settling in his ribs. Then Aizawa Shota dragged himself into the room in a sleeping bag and announced the quirk apprehension test with all the tenderness of a tax audit. Whoever places last is expelled, he said flatly. The class reeled. Uraraka yelped. Bakugo swore triumph. Izuku's stomach did a nervous flip, but training had wrapped a steady hand around his heart. Measure. Control. No violet unless danger demanded. Tests rolled. Sprint, grip strength, standing long jump. Izuku placed well. Ice rails offered perfect traction, and controlled microspikes in his shoes let him spring with precision. Every time his instinct wanted to push with that invisible field, he asked, is someone in danger? No, then don't. The ball throw, though. Midoriya, Aizawa said, eyes sharp behind bandages. Show me your maximum. Izuku swallowed. Maximum ice? He could hurl the ball with a helix sheath that would pierce the stratosphere, but he'd risk fracturing it into frozen shrapnel. Maximum violet? He couldn't summon it without crisis. Shinya's rule rang. Don't demonstrate what you can't repeat on command. Sir, Izuku said, request permission to use support technique to handle recoil. Aizawa stared a beat longer, then jerked his chin. Do it. Izuku cradled the ball. He formed a glove of ice around his forearm, layered in honeycomb cells to cushion shock. He drew a breath, dropped into a low thrower's stance, and whipped the ball forward. At the apex, he spun a microcyclone of ice crystals behind it, freewheeling for half a second to add spin and stability. The ball tore away, whine shrieking, and disappeared with a pop. The distance marker cheeped. Far. Not record-shattering, but respectable. The class murmured. Aizawa's scarf rustled. He looked dissatisfied, curious. His hair lifted fractionally. Izuku recognized the moment. Erasure. His ice softened along his arm, quirk muted. Fine. He'd expected that. He straightened, letting the ice melt to harmless puddles. Aizawa's gaze didn't flicker, but not because of the ice. It was because Izuku, just then, out of reflex, used a whisper of push to steady his balance after over-rotating. Not much, just a murmured suggestion to the air. His eyes did not turn violet. Aizawa's eyes narrowed as if he'd felt something he couldn't erase. He clicked his tongue, dropped the erasure, and said, like a man making a mental note to chase a rumor. After the tests, Izuku sank onto a bench, head buzzing. Tsuyu hopped over, handing him a bottled tea. Ribbit, thanks again, for the exam. Any time, he said, meaning it. Bakugo stalked by, a sneer honing itself on his mouth. Ice skate dweeb, you think those parlor tricks make you a hero? Izuku met his eyes calmly. They make people safer, he said. It surprised them both that his voice didn't shake. That night Shinya texted a single sentence. Erasure sees what's loud. Keep your violet a whisper. Izuku typed back. How do I make a storm whisper? Shinya replied with a photo. A leaf on a forehead, the caption start small. The alarm was a hiccup, 3 short bursts, a stutter, then an all clear. A false trigger at the front gate. Students laughed, grumbled, stretched tension out of their shoulders like cats shaking off raindrops. Izuku didn't laugh. The instant the siren bit the air, the field inside him woke like it had been sleeping with one eye open. The hallway blurred into potential vectors. Doors, windows, lines of fire. The violet rings brushed the backs of his eyes like a moth's wing. He breathed through it, counted exhale beats. No danger, no pull. After class, he took the train to Shinya's facility. They strapped a heart monitor to his chest and a halo-like device onto his temples. Shinya's assistant, a quiet woman with quick hands, named Saya, explained that the setup would simulate risk, sudden sounds, a projected image of a collapsing beam, a rubber bullet gun with foam rounds aimed at a dummy that looked unsettlingly like a classmate. Shinya stood at his shoulder. Rules, he said. 1. You never aim push at a person's center mass. Surfaces. Obstacles. 2. You never pull a person into another danger. When in doubt, move the world not the person. 3. If you feel rage, you stop. Fear sanctifies. Rage lies. Izuku nodded. Understood. The first drill was a startle. A sharp bang behind him and a foam beam dropping toward the dummy. Izuku spun and pulled without thinking. The beam shivered back up like it had second thoughts and settled harmlessly against the support bracket. The violet flared bright, then dimmed. The heart monitor chirped. Saya said, "Good," into a small recorder. The second drill sent 3 foam rounds in quick succession at different angles. Izuku wanted to push them away. His hands itched, but he remembered Rule 1 and instead raised the floor. He shoved the mat up in a ripple, warping the field so the rounds kissed it and died. Better, Shinya murmured. The third drill was he hardest. A recorded cry layered with a spark shower and a cardboard cutout painted like Suyu. Something ugly lit inside him. The memory of the spear cannon. The violet roared awake. Here, he barked, and the cutout snicked off its stand, sailing into his arms with a papery flit. He blinked, choked on a laugh because it was so stupidly not her, and then he was breathing too fast because his body didn't care if it was cardboard. It remembered the shape of the fear. Shinya's hand landed lightly between his shoulder blades. Name it. Fear of failing someone right in front of me, Izuku said hoarsely. Good, Shinya said softly. It's not your enemy. It's your alarm clock. They drilled a turn off. When the violet came, Izuku learned to picture a small dial in his chest. He named it Resolve. He imagined turning it from emergency to ready. The rings faded on command twice out of 5. It was enough to count as a beginning. To close, Shinya rolled in a weighted sphere, a training ball dense as regret. Push it 1 meter, he said, without breaking your stance. Izuku set his feet, found the field, and asked it to lean away. The ball slid like a frown. 30 centimeters. 60. 1 meter. He exhaled shakily, sweat slicking his neck. The violet winked, then went out. Tomorrow, Shinya said, we add moving targets, and we talk about people who might be looking for your eyes. Izuku let that sink through him like a stone into a calm lake. He knew nothing of ancient clans or circular-eyed myths beyond what Shinya had hinted. Only that power never lived alone. It had shadows. He texted Suyu on the way home. Good day. She replied with a sticker of a frog holding a tiny gold medal. Ribbit. He smiled into the train window, his reflection soft, eyes ordinary. For now, they met on a rooftop where Musudafu wore its evening lights like jewelry. Shinya crouched at the ledge, a shadow with a heartbeat. He handed Izuku a photo. A mural, half-ruined, depicting figures W. Ith ringed eyes standing beneath a storm. The caption was scorched away. Group calls themselves Relic 9, Shinya said. They collect what they don't understand and break what they can't collect. They've been trading in shinobi artifacts. Most fakes, some not. They'd love to prove your eyes real. Izuku's mouth dried. How many know? Fewer than last week, Shinya said, tone dry enough to sandwood. But rumors travel by gravity. You'll keep your circle small. I've told Aizawa there's a parallel control practice we're using to help you avoid collateral. He's not thrilled. He respects results. What about All Might? Shinya watched a billboard flicker into a new ad. All Might is the sun. Suns burn and bless. He knows every student his shadow falls across. But I won't cast yours until you say so. Izuku thought about his mother's arms around him, about Tsuyu's frog smile, about his notebook filling with careful words. Secrets keep you safe until they isolate you, he wrote once. Truth set you free if you can afford the fallout. He wasn't ready for fallout. Not yet. Okay, he said. Small circle. Shinya nodded. Then 2 more techniques to braid with your icecraft before things get louder. 1. Chakra sense. Not mystical mind reading. Just attention sharpened to flows. Heat, motion, intent made muscle. 2. Soften and drink. A touch of what legends call Preta path. You dampen an incoming energy. Not steal it. Quirks are not batteries. Don't try to drain them. But a flamethrower's plume, you can rob its teeth. They practiced in a closed forge room. An assistant ignited a controlled flame column. Izuku raised a hand and asked the heat to lean, to spend itself early, to sag. The plume guttered, then sprang stubborn. He adjusted breath, pictured a hand cupping the flame's hunger and smoothing it. The column fluttered, less fierce. He laid a thin ice veil in front of it, and the combination, that soft theft of heat plus a willing surface, made the fire a whisper. Good, Shinya said. Now try it with a kinetic battering ram. Izuku did and learned why heroes wore braces. He didn't absorb force. He stroked it sideways so it arrived tired, then met it with a forgiving wedge of ice. He bruised anyway and grinned through it, because everything felt like a puzzle whose pieces were finally, mercifully, labeled. The week ended with a field trip scheduled for Monday, unforeseen simulation joint. A disaster rescue lab. Aizawa's mouth was a flat line describing it. 13 sparkled as they spoke about black holes and hero responsibility. Izuku circled the itinerary in his notes and underlined water, debris, fire. He knew those languages now. He'd learned the whispers. On Sunday night, he stood on his balcony and did the leaf exercise in the wind. The leaf stayed. The city breathed. He closed his eyes, asked the violet to visit. It didn't. He smiled anyway. See you when it matters, he told the dark. The unforeseen simulation joint looks like a diorama a god forgot to put back in its box. Earthquake quarters, landslide canyon, inferno dome, typhoon canal. 13 stands at the center in their Starfield suit. Voice a careful comment about responsibility in rescue. Aizawa watches from the railing with arms crossed, hair a warning flag. The air changes, like a storm taking a breath. A warp opens on the plaza. Purple fog, metal teeth of the world bending inward. Villains step out of the bruise in space. The class freezes, then scatters on Aizawa's barked order. Izuku's field pricks awake immediately, the violet rings pressing behind his eyes as if they're waiting for permission. They don't ask long. The fog swells. Space tears. The room's gravity flips its coin and throws them. Izuku, Tsuyu, and Mineta land in a slap of cold dark. Flood zone. On a rocking boat surrounded by villain shapes cutting wakes through the water. Rain needles down. The canal walls glimmer with algae and broken lamps. Ribbit. Status? Tsuyu asks. Cool even when drenched. Breathing. Izuku says, already drawing a thin ice rail along the boat's edge to stabilize it. He tastes metal in his mouth. The field hums like a power line. I can walk water. Short bursts. I'll make you steps. A fin cleaves toward them. Too fast, too purposeful. A shark-mouthed villain launches, spray arcing in a wet halo. Izuku doesn't think. The violet opens. Rings stack their music in his vision. Back, he snaps, and the water itself seems to lean away. The leaper's arc warps mid-flight, cartoonish for a heartbeat. He splashes wide, barking a curse. Izuku feels the cost immediately. A little pop behind his left eye, a pressure bloom. Not bad, not yet. Nice, Tsuyu says. Eyes bright. I'll draw them out. She uncurls her tongue, whips a villain off a buoy, and lands light on the prow. Mineta, stomach knotted but game, starts popping sticky balls into a chain net that Izuku frosts into an interlaced barrier. 3 more approach. One with long knives, one with a drill forearm. One with a rope of living kelp. Izuku meets them with scaffolding. Hex pads of ice blooming across the canal like lily pads. He tilts their surfaces 1 degree off true. Anyone who lands wrong will slide into a planned pocket where Mineta's sticky chain waits. Ribbit, nice footing, Tsuyu says as she bounds between pads, kicking a knife man into the net. Feels like a gym, a very cold gym. It'll melt. Time box is 2 minutes, Izuku says, and flings a spear-thin ice screw to pin the kelp roper's wrist to a post. He breathes through the field's itch. The violet wants to take over. To push everything away and pull allies near. He keeps it on a leash. Protect, create room, don't dominate. A shadow moves on the far walkway, different rhythm from the thugs, too deliberate. The figure wears a rain-slick cloak. Hood up, gloves ink dark. He doesn't shout or posture. He studies the water like a puzzle he's already solved. Then he produces a paper tag inked with concentric circles and throws it in a flat arc. Izuku's field flares with warning. The tag lands and doesn't get wet. Water beads around it like it's a little island of disrespect. The surface sags around the tag, an anti-adhesion seal. Izuku's right foot hits that radius and nearly slides through to his hip. The water refuses his chakra. The violet rings bite brighter on instinct. He leaps back to safe surface pads, heart slamming. The cloaked figure tilts his head, interested. Tsuyu lands beside him. Ribbit. That felt wrong. Seal, Izuku says. Bad copy of something old. His eyes cut to the hood. Not League. Different. Relic 9, Tsuyu guesses, reading his fear like a page. You told me rumors. It fits. The hooded operative flicks another tag. It lands, unfurling concentric ripples. That flattened the waves into glass inside its radius. Villains move onto the circle confidently, laughing as their feet don't slip. Izuku's mind splits into layers. Field, icecraft, physics. He answer. S with scatter. He grows a forest of ice pilings from below, thin as wrists but hundreds of them, at irregular angles. They pierce the surface and break the operative's neat circle into an archipelago of useless puddles. The anti-adhesion charm can't cover so many contact points at once. The water becomes complicated, which is Izuku's favorite terrain. The hooded figure lifts his hands as if to applaud, then withdraws something slimmer than a kunai, a needle with etched rings. He snaps his wrist. The needle whistles through 2 raindrops and a meter of air, straight at Tsuyu. Izuku doesn't think. The violet takes the wheel. Here, the word is fierce and frightened and full of command. Tsuyu jerks sideways toward him, air snapping. The needle scythes past, clipping a lock of her hair. It thunks into a post, quivering. For a moment the world is quiet except for their breath. Then the cost hits. White static across Izuku's vision. A migraine blooming from behind his eyes like a cruel flower. His stomach tips. Deku. Tsuyu's hand grips his elbow, anchoring him. Ribbit. You okay? Yeah, he lies, blinking a flashing crescent away. Limit, setting itself. He feels the dial. Shinya taught him. Resolve, and turns it from emergency to ready by will alone. The rings dim. The pain eases to a manageable hiss. Mineta finishes lacing the net. Guys? He points with shaking hand. Boat full of dudes starboard. A skiff roars in, 3 villains in mismatched wetsuits and a 4th holding a makeshift harpoon grenade. Izuku can't afford another full pull this soon. He pivots tactics. Make 'em spend it early. He mutters, and tilts the water ahead of the skiff by 1 degree via sheets of micro-ice just below the surface. The boat corrects instinctively. He tilts the opposite way. They overcorrect. He tilts again. Now they're fishtailing, chewing speed in their panic. Before they can stabilize, he raises a wedge of ice like a breakwater. The skiff plows into it with a dull bang, dripping to a halt. Tsuyu springs, 2 kicks and a sweep. Mineta's chain leaps to finish it. 3 in the net, 1 sputtering unconscious. The hooded operative doesn't move to help them. He's watching Izuku instead, hands tucked back into his sleeves like a patient teacher. He tosses a 3rd tag. It blooms midair, not on water, spinning, humming like a tuning fork. The sound threads into Izuku's bones. And for a heartbeat his ice refuses to form, the molecules sulking. A chakra jamming effect? He adjusts. Don't fight the silence, work around it. He abandons raw formation and instead slides already made ice from pad to pad, like shuffling cards across felt. It's slower. It's enough. He forms a bridge to a half-sunk bus where 2 examinees cling to the windows, eyes wild. Tsuyu takes the bridge in a sprint, tongue lashing to haul the first student up and out. The hood's head cocks again. Data collected. He draws a 4th tag, this one with a small glass bead in the center. He throws. The bead hits the water and sinks, fast, dragging the tag down. A heartbeat later, it explodes in a bloom of vacuum, a gulp of space swallowing water and dragging everything nearby down half a meter. Pads teeter. The bus groans. Izuku feels the field choose. He knows what it wants to do. push everything away and snap the surface flat. He also knows if he does that at full taste of violet, his brain will buzzsaw itself. So he makes a smaller ask. He pushes a ring only along the bridge, a throat clearing of gravity that flattens the path for Suyu and the examinees but leaves the wider chaos untouched. The cost nips rather than mauls. He holds it as Suyu leaps back with the second student holding onto her shoulders, ribbiting thanks through a sob. A bullet cracks from somewhere high. Suyu's pupils knife thin. Izuku turns to pull instinctively, but the dial in his chest catches his hand. Not a person. Move the world. He pushes the air in a quick wedge in front of them. He bullet kisses it and loses just enough that when it reaches them, it ticks off the ice rail instead of meat. He feels a hot pinprick behind his temple and breathes through it. The hooded operative finally moves toward the warp fog congealing again on the far catwalk. He flicks the needle line post with 2 fingers. It slides free and slaps back into his palm like a tame fish. He dips his head, acknowledgement, not respect, and steps into the dark bruise of space, gone. Ribbit. He bailed, Suyu says, angry in a quiet way. Not before taking notes, Izuku says, angrier. He hurries to the SPOT where the first tag had warped the water and plucks the spent paper from a crevice. Up close, the ink's wrong. Mimicry without understanding. Still dangerous. He pockets it. Villain numbers thin A. S instructors carve the larger assault apart elsewhere. In Flood Zone, the last handful surrenders when Minetta's net and Suyu's kicks and Izuku's suddenly appearing ice stairs convince them this is a bad day to be damp and criminal. They herd the captives onto a stabilized raft and lash it to a pole. Izuku dials the violet down again and then again, until he can't feel it chafing at his periphery. The migraine recedes to a tolerable ache. Deku, Suyu says, voice low as the rain eases. Limit? 3, he says, after scanning his own interior like a medic. 3 big ones before I'm unreliable. Smaller adjustments. Tilts. Pads. I can sustain, but the heavy pull, push. It taxes me. If I go for a 4th without rest, I think I black out. Okay, she says, steady acceptance without judgment. Then we make 3 count. They do. The last emergency is a snapped cable threatening to whip across a cluster of students hiding under a broken awning. Izuku marks the tension geometry in a breath, then uses one last pull to nudge the cable's path 2 degrees into an ice catch he's already set like a catcher's mitt. It slaps into the glove hard, sings, and stops. The rings dim to embers. His vision swims. Suyu's hand is already on his wrist. All Might's arrival is a thunderclap, plus the sunrise noise of him being himself. The warp fog elsewhere collapses like a bad idea reconsidered. Aizawa staggers by later, bandaged and laced with grit, giving them a long, critical once-over. His eyes linger on Izuku a beat too long to be casual. You 3, he says, voice frayed. Didn't drown. Good. Ribbit. Thanks, sensei. Suyu says. Izuku half smiles. He could tell Aizawa everything right now. Ride honesty into whatever fallout awaits. He could also keep his circle small one more day. He touches the pocket where the ruined tag rides, cold and crinkly. Tonight, he'll show Shinya. They'll name it, file it, plan. He looks out over the flood zone. Pads melting, rain departing. The water smoothing itself like a cat after a fight. He's tired in a new way, wiring hot and sore at the soul's hinge. He also feels something stubborn and grateful. The violet greeted danger and didn't devour him. And Suyu is alive, wet, sniffling, making sure Mineta doesn't fall asleep on the raft and drown. He laughs, a small raw sound in his throat. We did okay, he tells the water. It nods. UA's infirmary smelled like clean thunder, ozone, sanitizer, and the faint sugar of recovery girl's cough drops. Suyu sat on the edge of the bed opposite Izuku's, hair still damp, uniform jacket hanging from one shoulder like a towel. Mineta snored between them, mouth open, dotted head leaning at a catastrophic angle toward the floor. Ribbit. If he rolls, I'm not catching him, Suyu said. Izuku smiled, then winced as the smile tugged at the post-migraine ache behind his eyes. He'll stick to the tile. Gross, she said, but her mouth twitched. 13 debriefed them quietly at bedside, Starfield suit dulled by soot. You 3 responded with restraint, they said, voice soft but firm. Disaster zones punish big gestures. You chose measured ones. That's hero work. Their gaze lingered on Izuku, kind and curious. Still, there was a moment when the water seemed to choose you. Interesting. We'll discuss energy safety later. When 13 drifted away, the curtain peeled back and Aizawa stepped in. Bandages like punctuation across his face. His hair lay flat, no erasure rumble, yet his eyes cut with surgical calm. "Midoriya," he said, "walk." They slipped into a tiny conference room down the hall. No windows, 2 chairs, a carafe of water. Aizawa lowered himself like gravity had a grudge. "I'm not looking to expel a kid who just helped keep classmates breathing," he began. "But I am looking to understand the thing I'm supposed to keep safe in my classroom." He watched Izuku for 3 breaths. "During the test, I erased your quirk. You balanced anyway, like the air itself steadied you. Today in Flood Zone, multiple students report a pressure change around you. My quirk can't silence what I can't see." His mouth flattened. "Tell me enough so I can do my job." Izuku's first instinct, to apologize, stopped at the door of that tone. Shinya had warned him this talk would come. He sat straighter. "I'm training a parallel control framework," Izuku said carefully, with pro-hero edge shot. "It isn't a second quirk. It's older, like breathwork and stance, but deeper. It maps to physics. Push, pull, tilt. I can use it in small, repeatable ways. The larger uses, like what you heard today, cost me. If I overuse it, I black out." Aizawa's gaze didn't flicker at the name. Edge shot meant competence. It also meant this wasn't random teenage improvisation. "Side effects?" Aizawa asked. "Migraines," Izuku said. "Perceptual lag if I chain too many heavy moves. Hands shake if I force past 3 big surges. Limits? 3 strong pushes or pulls before I'm unreliable. Micro adjustments I can sustain. Tilted surfaces, air wedges, ice scaffolds. I've been logging it." He slid his battered notebook across the table. The page facing up read, "Field asks I can afford, red lines I won't cross." Aizawa skimmed. His mouth didn't move, but something about his shoulders loosened a millimeter at the bullet points. "Move the world, not people. Pull to save, push to create room. Never pull someone into a fresh danger. Turn off when the save is done." He closed the notebook, fingers tapping it once. "Edge shot's involvement keeps this inside the professional lane," he said. "Here are my boundaries. 1. No solo experiments on school grounds. 2. If you intend to use this framework in class, you tell me first. 3. Never demonstrate something you can't repeat on command. 4. If you feel the blackout coming, you stop and you signal. Hand up, verbal call, something. I'd rather fail a drill than scrape you off the floor." Izuku swallowed. "Yes, sir. Last thing," Aizawa added. The words slightly softer. "This smells like something people might want from you. Secrets rot if they isolate you. You will need allies who know enough to help when it goes wrong." He stood. "Edge shot is one. I'm offering to be another." He opened the door, then looked back. "Good work today. Don't let that go to your head." Izuku bowed from the chair. "Thank you, sensei." Back in the infirmary, Suyu raised her brows. "Ribbit. Suspension?" "No," he said, still a little stunned. "Supervision. Better word," she agreed. "I like words that begin with S but end with us not dying." He laughed, and the ache behind his eyes dialed down another notch. Edge Shot's facility at midnight was all quiet steel and vending machine hum. Shinya and Saya were already at the workbench when Izuku arrived. The ruined tag from Flood Zone laid out beneath a magnifier lamp. A slender microscope, a row of solvent vials, and a chalkboard that already had 3 concentric circles sketched in white. Saya didn't look up from her notes. "Hello, Midoriya. Tea?" "Yes, please," he said, grateful. Shinya gestured him closer. "What do you see?" Izuku bent to the tag. Up close, the ink bled like tired veins. The circles were imperfect. Almost right if you didn't know what right felt like. "Fake," he said, "but functional. It killed my adhesion in a small radius." "Good," Shinya said. He tapped a corner. Inks loaded with metallic microfillings, cheap conductivity. They etched a ring pattern they found on a mural and hoped intent would fill the gaps. The anti-adhesion work, because they stumbled onto an acoustic trick. The tag hummed at a frequency that encouraged the water's surface to decohere with your chakra binding. Sloppy but clever. Saya slid a photo across T. He bench. A bead embedded in a paper circle. "This one's worse," she said. It carried a dense microglass bead that sync detonated to create a temporary cavitation pocket. "Not chakra, just mean physics." We were lucky it stayed small, Shinya said. Scale that by a factor of 10 and you get a hole in the canal that swallows a boat. Izuku exhaled. Relic 9, right? The hooded one felt patient. Like he was watching me. Not the fight. Shinya's mouth thinned. He chalked a second diagram. The same rings, this time nested around a small rectangle. Intercepted chatter tonight referenced an item. Rinne focus lens. No specs. Rumor says it makes the ring storm louder. Izuku's stomach tilted. Amplifier. Or magnifier, Shinya said. Or trap. You will never touch it. You will not allow it near you. If they wave it like bait, you let me or any senior hero smash it or steal it. Repeat it back. Izuku straightened, palms suddenly cold in the way that had nothing to do with his quirk. I will never touch it. I won't let it near me. If they dangle it, I call you and we break it or take it. Shinya met his eyes, satisfied. Good. They moved to training, but tonight wasn't about power. It was about off switches. They dimmed the lights. Saya set a metronome. Shinya had Izuku walk a thin rail of light projected on the floor while the metronome ticked and, at random intervals, a small chime sounded in his earpiece. On the chime, he had to turn the violet off, not resist it, but invite it to rest. The first 10 attempts were graceless, power clung like burrs. The next 10 were better. On the 21st chime, he felt the rings settle without that buzzing ache, like closing curtains before the sun bleached the room. Lock in the feel, Shinya said. Name it, Izuku WR. Oat in his notebook between sets. Violet idle. Window closed. Breeze still in the room. They added micro-tilt drills. Not pushing or pulling, but nudging a rolling sphere to choose a different groove without visibly touching its path. Ice joined as sculptor, not crutch. He carved tiny gyros from clear ice, spun them on strings, and learned to use breath to steady wobble. It looked silly. It made his field precise. Festival's coming, Shinya said later, handing him a towel. Spectacle tempts unripe power. You'll show craft, not fireworks. Izuku nodded, then hesitated. Aizawa knows enough now. He gave me boundaries. Good, Shinya said simply. Suns burn, needles stitch. You need both. Before he left, Shinya paused by the mural photo he'd shown on the rooftop, now pinned above the chalkboard. He spoke without looking at it. My great-grandmother said the ringed eyes show up when a family forgets it ever had them, he murmured. Makes the world humble again. He glanced at Izuku, faint wryness in his face. Consider the world warned. Izuku grinned despite the weight of the day. All worn it gently. Morning brought band-aids of sunshine across the campus. Aizawa's class met in a quiet corner for post-incident paperwork that was mostly a cover for checking pupils, reflexes, and attitude. Todoroki watched Izuku thoughtfully. Bakugo smoldered at a new setting. Ararik said something about gravity back at USJ and then laughed, saying, I guess that's your whole brand, huh? Trying to make it our brand, Izuku said. As in, keeping us all on the ground. Tsuyu nudged him with an elbow, satisfied. Ribbit. Aizawa stopped by as they filed out. Midoriya, 1 more meter of rope for your leash. Izuku tensed until Aizawa added, if it starts to sing in your head during a normal class. You step into the hall and breathe. I'll cover the attendance ding. Understood, Izuku said. And Midoriya? Aizawa's voice dropped minutely. Good work. He was gone before Izuku could say thanks. That night, Izuku dreamt of the flood zone water smoothing itself, ripples fading, the surface a mirror. He walked across it without effort because no one was drowning anymore. He woke with the taste of clean air and the certainty that control wasn't the cage, panic was. Control was the door. He wrote that down too. UA in festival season felt like a city tuning its strings, banners unfurling. Scaffolds going up around the stadium, first years pretending not to stare at the stands they'd soon step into. Posters of alumni gleamed on the main walk, legends with smiles like weather. Every hallway conversation had a speed it didn't have last week. Edge Shot's message arrived before homeroom. Practice, not panic. Come by after last bell, between first period and lunch. Izuku turned a disused storage alcove into a laboratory the size of a broom closet. He taped a chalk line on the floor. He filled a narrow Tupperware tray with water and, not so secretly thrilled, breathed until a glass-clear disk of ice formed inside it, 3 millimeters thick, 12 centimeters across. He carved 3 radial grooves with a fingernail. It looked like a tiny vinyl record. Next he froze a spindle with a hollow heart and nested the disc onto it. One more piece. A string loop with a bead of ice the size of a shelled peanut tied in the center. Threaded that through the spindle's heart, gave it a pull, and the disc spun, a silent gyro, humming with stored intent. He balanced the rig in his palm and practiced the drill. Breathe in, tilt the air by less than a breath. Breathe out, untip it. The ice disc responded like a patient pupil, correcting wobble when he asked, shivering when he lost the conversation. Someone knocked lightly on the doorframe. Ribbit, are you making dessert? Suyu's eyes curved as he grinned. Dessert that scolds me if I breathe wrong. She closed the door with a toe and hopped in. Show me. He did, shoulders soft, string tug minimal. She watched the minute corrections and nodded like a metronome. Again with your eyes closed, she said. He tried. The ice wobbled harder. She tapped his wrist. Elbow in. The rest of your arm is lying about being relaxed. He laughed and fixed it. The wobble smoothed. You're a mean coach. Ribbit. I'll invoice in flies. She flicked one of Minetta's discarded sticky balls off a shelf like a cat. Obstacle race first, right? Then cavalry battle. Yeah, he said, still spinning the disc. Obstacle race is perfect for tilt lines and air wedges. No big violet moves. All craft. He pictured the opening sprint. The bottle. Neck through the gate as students collided with each other's ambitions. He imagined laying invisible ramps of air to step onto, making the ground spend other people's momentum early. He smiled. Let them run downhill where I choose. Cute and evil, she approved. Cavalry, weight sharing and traction. Micro tilt our lane to make us feel light. Tilt theirs a hair the other way so they feel like they're running through soup. She blinked, impressed. Don't get caught looking smug. He spun the disc faster, then slowed it with a breath until it seemed to hang on the string like a promise. Smug is heavy, he said. I want to be weightless. Brackets dropped at noon on a huge display in the cafeteria. Midnight posed beside it like a game show host. Present Mike provided fireworks with his voice. The first event would be the obstacle race, then cavalry battle, then one-on-one brackets seeded by points. Even the shy kids shouted. Bakugo didn't shout. He smirked like he'd already won the credits theme. Todoroki stood a shade back from the crowd, eyes hooded, scanning names. When he glanced at Izuku, his gaze lingered a fraction too long on the way Izuku's shoes set on the tile, heels not quite flat. Weight always choosing, not suspicion exactly. Notice. A moment later, Bakugo shouldered up, explosions snapping quietly in his palm like impatient fingers. Hey, Ice Feet, he said. Voice pitched for a private challenge none of the cafeteria's 100 ears would miss. Festivals where we stop pretending you're equal to me. Izuku held his eyes and let the challenge pass through him like wind through reeds. Festivals where we show how well we save under pressure, he said mildly. He tapped the bracket board. Or did you skip the briefing? Bakugo's mouth curled. I'll save you the embarrassment by ending you fast. Ribbit. Save your lines for the camera, Suyu said from Izuku's shoulder, as implacable as a riverbank. Bakugo scoffed and peeled away, leaving sparks and the faint smell of singed pride. Todoroki's gaze flicked between them and the board again, thoughtful. When he spoke to Izuku later, it was almost conversational. Your ice control is unusual, he said. No brute forcing. You spend your opponent's energy instead of your own. Costs less, Izuku agreed. My favorite things cost less. He wanted to add and leave people standing, but the festival wasn't the place to preach. Edge Shot's office that evening was already cleared of delicate things. Saya had rolled a white mat across the center. The only break in the spare space was a board of photos on one wall. USJ security stills, close-ups of the ruined tags, and a grainy shot of a person in a rain hood stepping into warp fog. Beside it, a fresh printout, a map of the stadium district. T with a thin red arrow drawn to a service road. Relic 9 courier sighted, Saya said without preamble. Alias, Glassmonger, arrived with the broadcast equipment trucks. Their crate manifest says, optical housing, fragile. Shinya didn't sit, he folded his arms and became a line. Lens, he said, probably a fake, possibly not. Izuku's throat felt dry. He repeated the oath Shinya had drill D into him until it sat flat in his chest. I won't touch it, I won't let it near me. If they wave it, we smash or steal it. Good, Shinya said. Now your stealth objective for the festival. He tapped his own chest. Heroes talk. You will be watched. The trick is to make them watch the wrong thing. He pointed at Izuku's shoes. Let them think it's all ice. You will lean on air tilts in micro. Pushes only when masked by obvious icecraft. Rule of thumb. If a camera can't tell whether it was wind, luck, or your quirk, you can use it. Izuku nodded, dazzled without confessing. Exactly. Yo. Measure of success is not applause. It's that Aizawa doesn't need to file more paperwork, Shinya deadpanned. Saya handed Izuku a small cloth pouch. Salt, she said. If you're forced to reveal, you can salt the ground. Ice adheres better. You get better traction. Looks like quirk, reads like physics. Legal. Izuku cinched the pouch to his belt. Thank you. Training that night sharpened to a point. They drilled bottleneck starts. Saya made a moving wall of foam blocks in the mat room's doorway. Izuku had to reach the far wall without processing more than 2 hard contacts. He found the rhythm, narrow, step, wedge, slide, and shaved off milliseconds each attempt by tilting the air on his toe off and smoothing it on his plant. They practiced balance theft. Shinya, a flitting needle, tried to tap Izuku's shoulder at random. Izuku used a thumb-sized air wedge ahead of Shinya's step, not to trip him, impossible, but to mistime the tap so it landed where Izuku had been. Shinya's mouth twitched. Acceptable. They finished with a cold start violet drill, not to use it, but to not use it. Saya popped a snap bang behind Izuku. He let the rings brush his vision and then guided them off. I like a teacher redirecting an eager child's hand from a stove. The metronome clicked twice, then stilled. Izuku's pulse followed it down. Festival is not USJ, Shinya said, low. It's theater with consequences. Go write the right story. The day before the festival, Class 1A gathered on the stadium's infield for a light walkthrough. Present Mike showed them where cameras would live. Smintos pointed at the safety trenches. Snipe waved at the skyboxes. On a water break, Iida ran up, chopping the air with his hands. Midoriya, I intend to form a cavalry with you, if you will accept me as a steed, so to speak. My engines offer speed. Your ice offers platforms. Our third could. Ribbit. Fourth, Tsuyu said, appearing with cups. Pick me and we win. Midoriya keeps us glued to the world. Iida hauls, I jump. And the fourth screams in panic to alert us to danger. She glanced at Mineta, who was eavesdropping. He pointed at himself, scandalized. She didn't blink. Ribbit. Iida, flustered but game, nodded briskly. Excellent. Then we are decided. Uraraka jogged by, cheeks pink from heat. Save me a place if your fourth changes, she called. I can make us light if the rules allow. They won't, Iida called back. Scandalized. Anti-gravity cavalry is cheating? Ribbit. Only if we get caught, Tsuyu murmured, and everyone pretended not to hear. On the way out, Izuku felt the hair raise on the back of his neck. Not danger exactly. Attention. He looked up toward the skyboxes and saw nothing of note, just glass and shadows. He looked toward the service road instead. Tay truck idled by the stadium's north gate. A crew in orange vests unloaded cases stenciled with optical and fragile. One worker's vest hung wrong. His boots were too new. He moved like someone who had never moved boxes for a living. Glassmonger. Izuku didn't break stride. He swallowed, let the sight pass by him like scenery, and texted a single leaf emoji to Shinya. The reply came back a moment later. Understood. Sun and Needle watching. He looked at his friends, at Iida earnest and creaky, at Uraraka radiant and trying not to bounce, at Tsuyu cool and assessing, and felt a knot he hadn't known he carried loosen a bit. Secrets rot if they isolate you, Aizawa had said. He had a teacher in his corner and a team who trusted him to be weird and precise and honest in the ways that mattered. That night he set the ice gyro turning one last time and breathed it down to stillness. He closed his notebook on the words he'd written at the top of the page. The stadium roared like weather. Confa. TTI cannons didn't fire. Smintos would have sued. But Present Mike did the job with his throat, mezzanines answering in waves. Cameras roosted on rails. The field smelled like chalk and nerves. Midnight's whip twitched, a punctuation mark. Obstacle race. Start at the north gate, finish on the track after 3 zones. Anything goes that isn't murder. Ready, sweethearts? A horn tore the air. Obstacle race. The bottleneck hit like a plug drain. 51st years converged on a gate sized for 20. Elbows, quirks, friendship, all negotiable. Izuku ducked, knees loose, and laid a ramp of air a shoe-length high at the threshold. Then iced a visible rail along the wall so the cameras had something to film. He stepped onto his invisible wedge, side slid up the wall rail, and skimmed over a tangle of legs. Behind him, 2 overeager sprinters hit his air lip and spent a chunk of momentum early, stumbling cleanly without pain, safe and suddenly slower. TCH. Bakugo skated on explosions beside him, slamming the gate frame with his palm. Cheap tricks, efficient ones, Izuku said, not looking back. They burst into Zone 1. Zero-pointer graveyard, a canyon of toppled robot limbs. Todoroki iced a broad sheet, smoothing junk into a glide. The sheet was strong. It was also heavy with his power. Izuku, instead of sprinting across it, tilted the sheet a degree with a whisper, just Enig. That anyone behind Todoroki ran uphill a hair without realizing why. Their strides shortened. They'd feel it in a kilometer. Todoroki glanced back, eyes narrowing like he smelled a thesis. A Fourier, the size of a sedan, rolled off a pile toward a girl with headphone jacks. The audience gasped. Izuku didn't. He swiveled one palm and spent the forearm's roll by nudging a wedge of air against the ground just ahead of it. The arm kissed the wedge, lost arrogance, and thunked to a stop. Jiro shot him a startled thumbs-up mid-run. He nodded once and didn't break stride. Zone 2. Ravine ropes. Lee. NES stretched across a crack in the track, some stable, some booby trap to spin. Students crowded the first ropes and immediately choked on their own shoes. Izuku didn't rope. He stepped over nothing. Air rungs a handspan tall, invisible to anyone not looking for how his ankles listed. For the cameras he grew thin frost struts that looked like spiderwebs and broke prettily after each footfall. Todoroki chose a different rope and tried to time Izuku's steps. Bakugo simply blasted, swearing at gravity as a biased referee. At the far anchor, someone shouted. A tiny kid with a tail slipped. Reflex took Izuku's hands. The violet brushed behind his eyes. No, he moved the world, not the person. A push under the rope's last meter flipped the sag into a gentle crest. Tailboy skidded onto safety on his own momentum, panting a thank you that blew away in the wind. Zone 3. Minefield, soft dirt, buried plates that sang with a pop and threw you skyward if you got cute. This was where the festival fed the gift factories. Izuku didn't let it. He read the ground like a whisper. Subtle color shifts where plates had been repacked, crumbs of grit too clean. He salted a line from Saya's pouch, pretending it helped his ice adhere. It did. He set narrow ice sandal pads on a diagonal path and footed each one like a piano key. When Bakugo tried to jump 3 at once, Izuku tilted the air before his second landing, half a degree, just enough to make the third pad take him at a stupid angle. Bakugo corrected with a curse that came out as pure combustion. Mineta, miles back, shrieked at a predictable volume. Mina cheered like she was born to it. Ida's engines sang. Uraraka punched the sky when she hit track. Finish line. Izuku crossed 4th, just behind Todoroki, Bakugo, and a support C. Or's kid on bouncy boots who had the week of his life. He raised a hand to the crowd because you wave when the stadium gives you energy and you didn't have to pull someone out of a death spiral to earn it. Cameras cut to replay. Ice rails sparkling, robot forearm settling, rope crest flipping. The commentary booth used words like craft and footwork and low collision choices. Aizawa, in the shadows, didn't smile. His eyes did a microscopic approving thing anyway. Tsuyu finished mid-pack with unflappable hops, tongue grabs, and a glare that told a mind to grow up. Izuku met her off the track with water. Ribbit, nice rescue, she said. Kept the gift makers bored, he said. Ribbit, you monster. Cavalry battle. Teams formed as fast as a rumor. Iida, Izuku, Tsuyu, and Mineta snapped into place like magnets. Iida took front, engines ready to yank. Tsuyu set a low, flexible center. Mineta climbed the rear with a bandolier of sticky mischief, headband hungry. Izuku held high, quiet hands on Tsuyu's shoulders. Mind-running vector math. Headbands glowed. 10 million points perched on Todoroki's forehead. Bakugo snarled after that number like it owed him rent. Midnight's whip popped. Begin. They didn't charge. Everyone charged. Izuku did the opposite. He made the ground under their own feet feel like a gentle downward slope and the ground under other teams feel like the slightest uphill sand. Ida's surprise lasted a breath. His grin lasted longer. They surged without sprinting, bodies smooth, legs fresh. Bakugo's cavalry slammed through a scrum, explosions trimming hair. He lunged for a rookie's headband. Mineta snapped a sticky ball mid-air. It splatted across Bakugo's gauntlet. He recoiled with an outraged bark. "You, ribbit," Tsuyu said, and pivoted, her balance changing like a cat's. When a taller team tried to flank, Izuku tilted them into the friendly jaw of a different scrum and they vanished cursing. He recognized the obvious trap forming, Todoroki icing the field wide. Making a freeway for himself. "Here comes the glacier," he warned, and it came. A beautiful, wasteful curtain of frost spreading in a confident sheet. Izuku spent it. He didn't fight the freeze. He asked it to sag. He laid micro-gutters across it with an ice stylus to encourage melt rivulets. His air wedges broke its coherence into plates that clicked politely underfoot. Oki's freeway turned into those bumpy lanes they install to make you slow down near schools. Several cavalry screamed, not from fear but from the indignity of physics betraying expensive power. Todoroki glanced up, whip quick, and their eyes met. He wasn't angry, he was curious the way a glacier thinks about rocks. They didn't go for his headband. Not yet, they picked second-tier bounties, steel, ink points from teams hunting the 10 million, growing fat without painting a target on their foreheads. Mineta was an artist of irritation, spraying sticky arcs on wrists that reached and slowing op. Onance by a step that translated into meters over a minute. Tsuyu decided 3 fights in a row just by being there, perfect footwork and honest eyes. With 30 seconds left, everyone had decided that playing smart was boring. The field collapsed toward Todoroki. Bakugo screamed something anatomically vivid and vaulted into the thick of it. Izuku made a call. "We're not taking the 10 million. Ribbit." "Agreed," Tsuyu said instantly. "What?" Mineta gawked. We can place high without inviting assassination in the brackets," Izuku said. "Spend their legs now, save ours." Iida B. arced a laugh, almost rude in how relieved it sounded. They veered, poached a 2,500 pointer from a team too busy staring at Todoroki to watch their flanks, then stole another 1,000 from the boots kid who was having his second best day. The horn blared. They finished top 5. Todoroki kept his 10 million with a face like ice doesn't sweat. Bakugo finished just behind him, looking like a grenade with opinions. Midnight purred the placements. The bracket machine spun. Round 1. Midoriya versus, not Todoroki. Round 2 pathing, though, Todoroki. Aizawa's hair floated a millimeter as he regarded the bracket board like it had personally bullied him. He looked at Izuku across the field. Izuku gave a very small nod. The "I see it, I'll be ready" nod. Aizawa pretended to cough so no one would call it approval. Backstage stinger. Between events, the athlete's tunnel smelled like rubber and the soft thread of liniment. Security cones freckled the corridor. Staff in vests ping-ponged crates toward the broadcast bay. Izuku stretched in the shadow of a scaffold, pulse low, breath measured. A white case wheeled past, stenciled optical housing, fragile. The pusher wore a vest that hung wrong and boots too clean. He moved like a man who had learned to move boxes from a manual. Glassmonger. Izuku didn't step toward him. He stepped away, into sightline of a dome camera, and lifted his hand. For a stretch like a boy loosening his shoulders. As his arm rose, his fingers flashed 3 tiny motions at a camera angle Aizawa had flagged during the walkthrough. The security feed pinged 2 offices. Shinya's and the Sun's. Edge shot arrived like a draft. He wasn't there. Then he was, a line becoming a man in the creep space between lights. Snipe materialized the honest way, boots heavy, hat brim low. Present Mike's laugh covered the sound of anything delicate. Glassmonger angled the case for the athlete's door. Snipe's hand landed on the handle. "Permit," he drawled. The courier smiled, a polite nothing, and produced a laminated card. Edge shot read the nothing in his eyes and the way his elbows didn't bump the case. "Random inspection," he said, voice as thin as a blade in a book. Glassmonger let go because not letting go would break the scene. Snipe undid clasps. The lid lifted. Inside lay a lens mounted in a nest of foam, clear as a frozen tear, concentric etches catching light and folding it inward. It felt like a sound too low to hear. Izuku, 10 paces back, felt his eyes want to answer. A prickle licked the base of his skull. He turned his head and looked at the scuffed floor instead. Edge Shot's face didn't change. His left hand altered its posture by a degree that meant danger to anyone who spoke his language. Snipe closed the case without drama. "Optics truck goes to loading bay C," he said lazily, gesturing the other direction. "Wrong corridor," Son. Oh, my mistake, Glassmonger said, and became a man who had always planned to go to loading bay C. He pushed the case away, steps steadier. Vest hanging just a hair more right. Edge shot didn't stop him. He folded into the lights and vanished. Snipe touched his earpiece. Somewhere outside, a patrol route changed. Izuku blew out the breath he hadn't let the stadium take from him. His fingers ached where he'd held his own eyes gently shut without shutting them. Shinya's text arrived like a leaf falling into his palm. You did not look. Good. Sun is burning the road. Izuku rolled his shoulders, checked his pulse, and let the lens become a thing he would name later in a room with doors that locked on the right side. He stepped back into the day. They made the one-on-ones feel like a holiday. Vendors hawked curry buns under hero posters. Kids waved glowsticks nobody needed. The bracket board rotated names. Suyu bumped his arm with hers. Ribbit, Rescue First brand worked. You saved people while racing and you didn't trip anyone into the hospital. Cameras noticed. Good, he said. Easy. Let's keep making them bored of disaster. Ribbit, now go fight pretty. He snorted. I'll settle for clean. He looked up at the board again. Round 2. Midoriya vs. Todoroki. The not finale he'd rather have late. But the brackets were a teacher too. He felt the violet sit quietly behind his eyes like a polite guest, hands folded, waiting to be invited. Not yet, he told it. We'll talk if he tries to drown the room. It hummed once, like it understood. The stadium's noise thinned to a blade when names hit the board. Round 2. Midoriya Izuku vs. Todoroki Shoto. They met on the sea. Hulk circle with a referee between them and 100,000 breaths stacked into one held note. Wind combed the flags. Cameras nested on rails like hawks. Izuku rolled his shoulders and felt the field behind his eyes sit, polite. Unlit, idle. He could taste the crowd. Metal, popcorn, a hint of ozone. Across from him, Todoroki stood like winter had decided to be a boy for a while. Calm, chin level, eyes reading edges. Midoriya, Todoroki said, as if they were about to trade textbooks. Your ice is economical. Trying to keep the bill low, Izuku said. The ref's hand cut the air. Begin. Todoroki didn't waste breath. His palm dropped and ice surged. A clean forward sheet that would have bullied a lesser footing off the world. Izuku didn't fight the wave. He spent it. He sketched 3 quick micro gutters with an ice stylus, letting the sheet form, and then asking it to sag along those veins. The ice kept its speed but lost its coherence, shattering into bumpy plates that slid past his shins without leverage. It looked beautiful and felt like a freeway ripped into rumble strips. Todoroki's eyes sharpened, noted. He tried a different geometry. No sheet, but pillars, staggered. To pen Izuku into a narrow alley and force a ring out with blunt geography. Izuku answered with tilt lines, invisible 1-degree ramps laid between pillars that made the incoming ice kiss the floor early and sit down. He left a safe lane angled not to the boundary but past Todoroki's shoulder. He took it, feet low, elbows relaxed. They passed within arm's length, 2 weather systems studying each other's pressure. From the booth, Present Mike whooped something about footwork and finesse. Smintos grunted the sound of quiet respect. Aizawa, back in the shadows, made that microscopic approving move with his eyes. Todoroki went wide. A quick freeze ring around Izuku's ankles. Izuku let the ring form and breathed through it, not breaking it, but drawing a hair-thin melt seam with heat he stole from his own air wedge. The ring blinked, solid, then not, and he slid his foot out of a bracelet that became a puddle. He didn't counter with a hurricane. He set 3 ice ribs in the floor that made Todoroki's next step land tired. Like running on sand, Todoroki adjusted, of course. His balance was a study in honest math, but micro costs accrue. Izuku watched muscle groups fire, tracked where stress traveled, and left soft traps there. A polished thumbprint on a tile, a centimeter of lift on a chalk edge, an air wedge that spun a breath into a nudge. Show me, Todoroki said, barely audible over the crowd, not a taunt. A request. It carried the weight of a boy who'd been told too many times what to be. Izuku didn't show the violet. He showed room. He surfed a thin rail past Todoroki's left, and instead of spearing the opening or shoving him hard, he planted a gentle ramp under Shoto's back foot, a line that invited a turn rather than a stumble. Todoroki pivoted into it, surprised to find the geometry helpful, and his next strike, reflex, not rage, came out clean rather than punishing. The audience didn't have the vocabulary for it, but they felt it. The fight was fast, exact, almost strangely kind. Two students trying to solve each other, not break each other. Todoroki escalated, finally, a surge with a spine in it. Broad freeze coupled with a quick knee-high ridge to scythe Izuku's ankles. Izuku let the first breath of the violet brush his vision, and chose the trick he and Shinya had drilled. Tilt, don't blast. He tilted the ridge 1 degree toward Todoroki as it grew, making the boy's own wave steal a sliver of its reach. He laid expansion lines across the sheet with an ice stylus, hairline canals that ate the wave's hunger like drains. The surge arrived big and then simply, tired, breaking around Izuku's knees like the end of a long day. The crowd roared anyway because sometimes technique looks like a magic trick if you sell it with a calm face. Todoroki's breath fogged. For the first time, his right hand twitched like it wanted something warmer than ice. Izuku didn't speak. He left a path. He set the floor between them into a mild downhill to Todoroki's right side, barely there. But honest, a geometry that made moving forward easier than retreating sideways into the comfort of ice. It wasn't a lecture. It was a question in the language of PH. YSICS. You can step out of the pattern if you want. Shoto's jaw clenched. His right hand relaxed. He did nothing with flame, but he also didn't flinch back into a freezing reflex. He took the easy foe. R-Ward and met Izuku at center with a low, perfect sweep that would have wrung out a sloppy fighter. Izuku chose clean. He let the sweep pass, rolled over the shin with a micro push that looked like WI.ND ruffling a sleeve, the only violet flicker all match, a note no one would hear unless they'd been listening for it since USJ, and finished the roll by planting his palm and sliding a spindle of ice up under Todoroki's heel. Todoroki's balance asked a question. Izuku answered by giving it back. He took the ring out and turned it into a half-step inward instead, a geometry that made staying in T. He circle require less effort than leaving it. The ref tensed, ready to call a boundary. He didn't need to. They reset, breath a little heavier now, both of them wearing identical small smiles that said this is the good part. Todoroki tried one more thing. A fan of spikes from the floor, not to impale, illegal, but to pen. Izuku flowed left, spent the fan against a false shoulder of ice he'd raised only to make noise. And then, when Todoroki's weight committed, Izuku did the first truly aggressive thing he'd done all bout. He took space. It was still kind. He didn't slam. He stepped in, tilt, ed Todoroki's lead knee a breath with an air wedge, and laid 2 sleek pads behind Shoto's heels. Link. When Todoroki tried to retreat, the pads gave him nothing to push off. His center hung for a fraction. Izuku touched his shoulder, light as a coach correcting a stance, and guided him onto his back. The thud was polite. The ref's hand chopped down. Point. Midoriya. Victory. The stadium's roar returned like surf. Izuku stepped back and offered his hand immediately. Todoroki took it and let Izuku pull him up, not with violet, with fingers and intent. Thanks, Shoto said. His voice did. NT crack on the word thanks the way some boys do when it costs them pride. It sounded like a coin he'd decided to spend. For what? Izuku asked. For setting the floor honest, Todoroki said, dusting his sleeve. His right hand flexed once, unbothered. That felt cleaner than usual. Izuku nodded once. Clean's cheaper. Todoroki huffed a micro laugh. Up in the VIP ring, Endeavor scowled Lee. Someone had pressed a thumb into an old bruise. He wanted a spectacle, a son who won with meteors and obedience. He got a boy who left a fight standing, unbroken, unbowed, and thoughtful. Aizawa's scarf moved in a breeze that hadn't touched it. His eyes did their approving ghost. Tsuyu met Izuku at the tunnel with water. Ribbit, pretty and clean. He grinned, cracking the cap. Trying to bore disaster to tears. Ribbit, it's working. They watched replay bite slices on a monitor. The broadcast slowed the moment Izuku set the gentle ramp under Shoto's foot. The commentators debated there he'd misstepped or Izuku had laid a support on purpose. They couldn't agree. That was the point. On the stat overlay, someone in the truck typed collision avoidance plus next to Izuku's name. A meme was born. As the screen cut away, a quiet ping lit Izuku's phone. A message from a contact saved as needle. Lens, misrouted. Glassmonger off the board for now. They'll try a darker corridor tonight. Keep your circle tight. If someone shoves help in your hands, drop it. He exhaled. The field behind his eyes hummed once, interested, not hungry. He closed that window gently, idle. On his way back to staging, he passed Todoroki speaking to Iida. The right side of Shoto's body looked almost looser. Not blazing, not thawing, just unclenched. Izuku didn't smile at that because it wasn't his victory to narrate. He just noted it like good weather and kept walking. The bracket ticked on. If scripts held, Bakugo waited up the path. An engine with opinions and a need to turn the volume up on any room he entered. Edge shots, dazzle without confessing, echoed in Izuku's pocket with the bouncing weight of the salt pouch Saya had given him. Rescue first. Make room, not mess. Leave them standing. He rolled his shoulders once and let the stadium swallow him back up. The chalk circle felt smaller when Bakugo stepped into it, like the stadium leaned in and the boundary line tightened its belt. He rolled his shoulders, palms crackling with baby thunder, eyes hot enough to warp a straight line. Round 3. Midoriya Izuku vs. Bakugo Katsuki, the ref called. The crowd's noise pitched upward, part anticipation, part appetite. Izuku bounced once on his toes. Idle, he told the violet quietly. It sat like a polite guest. He could feel Bakugo's blasts in his teeth, each palm pop a sure change his field registered as weather. Bakugo's grin was all knife. I'm done watching you dance. Then stop lunging at the music, Izuku said lightly. The ref cut the air. Begin. Bakugo moved like a punchline. Forward with an explosion off his right palm that flung him oblique, angling to clip Izuku from the blind side and bully a ring out early. He'd practiced this. Everyone in the IR middle school had felt some version of it. Izuku didn't give him a hard wall to hit. He tilted the air just ahead of Bakugo's landing, a thumb of pressure that spent a sliver of the explosion's car. Right. And laced a low ice sheen across 2 tiles, salted so he could read it, not skate on it. Bakugo's heel bit harder than he expected. The angle of his next blast came out angry instead of efficient. Good. Spend him early. KBOOM. Bakugo cut across the ring, blasting in pairs, trying to create a spiral of pressure that would pen Izuku against the rope. Izuku split the spiral with air wedges, thin, quiet. That made the shock cones vent upward like chimneys. The explosions still sounded big. They just didn't walk the room like Bakugo wanted. Fight me, nerd, Bakugo barked, furious at the crime of geometry. I am, Izuku said. And meant it. He raised ribbed ice pads where Bakugo's boots kissed down, honeycomb cells that yielded a centimeter and returned nothing. Each kick sprint felt like pushing through a mattress. Bakugo compensated with bigger detonations, chasing the feeling of traction. Izuku smiled in his head without letting it leak onto his mouth. Spend, spend, spend. The crowd, at first hungry for cinematic collisions, fell into a different rhythm. Present Mike yelling about flow control and vent paths, while the slow camera showed shockwaves being bent a hair off lethal and into harmless applause. Smintos rumbled approval when a floor tile that should have shattered instead slid. Bakugo changed tempo, because of course he did. He cut power for a breath, silent, and then a pea-shot fast flickers pecked the air. Tight, vicious, designed to hit between breaths. Izuku's field read the staccato. He refused the violet. He moved the world a whisper at a time. Micro pushes that looked like wind kicking at a sleeve. Enough to detune the pellets so they arrived tired, chipping chalk instead of cheekbone. Stop cheating with air, Bakugo roared, furious at physics. Izuku blinked at him. You explode. Bakugo snarled something anatomically inventive and cut low, palm skimming the floor, blast angling to sweep ankles. Izuku jumped late on purpose, letting the blast become a carrier he could ride. As he landed, he set 2 sleek pads behind Bakugo, linked, nothing to push off. Bakugo spun to adjust. His heel kissed the slick and slid a breath. Izuku didn't punish the slip. He gave it back, planted an ice post at Bakugo's hip height so that when the boy pinwheeled, the post offered a polite stopping point. The ref's whistle almost rose, then fell when he saw it wasn't a ring out. Collision avoidance plus pulsed on a replay screen somewhere. The meme had legs. Fight me, Bakugo shouted again, but the heat in it was fear's older brother, frustration. He'd come to crack skulls, not argue with the wind. Okay, Izuku said softly, and took space for the first time. He stepped into Bakugo's blast cradle, the triangle of air where the boy caught himself between detonations. He tilted the floor a whisper right, and the next blast, timed for up and forward, went up and sideways instead. Bakugo corrected instantly. Izuku had already salted a crescent, laid a soft rail, and vented the pressure up with a wedge. When Bakugo came down, his boots landed on that rail and slid into a line Izuku had drawn that pointed not at the rope, not at the ref, but at a clean kneel. Izuku met him there with both hands and guided the kneel into a pin. One hand at the shoulder, the other at the wrist, pressure light, no torque, just geometry. Bakugo's palm flared. Izuku vented. The detonation straight up with a micro push that made Present Mike yelp. Was that a draft or a miracle? Don't you? Bakugo snarled, choking on the word help. I won't humiliate you, Izuku said, low, only for him. I will end this clean. He did. He rolled the pin into a three-point control that touched Bakugo's knee, shoulder, and wrist to chalk without wrenching. The ref's hand chopped. Point. Midoriya. Victory. The stadium detonated in legal ways. Bakugo ripped out from under the hold on sheer fury a half-second after the call, rolling to his feet with breathless rage. He stalked 2 steps, chest heaving, ready to swing that rage into a stupid place, and then he saw no mockery in Izuku's face. Just a boy steady on his own feet, hands open, not gloating. The swing drained out like a bucket held wrong. Bakugo spat off to the side. You think you're better than me? I think I can be better for people, Izuku said. You can too. Today it just cost more the way you tried. Bakugo's lip curled. He looked like a cliff deciding whether to calve. Don't preach at me. I won't, Izuku said, and didn't. Bakugo stomped off, a live grenade with the pin carefully put back in. The crowd buzzed. The commentary truck replayed the kneel pin 3 times in 3 angles, adding a lower third tag, redirect, don't wreck. Tsuyu met Izuku at the tunnel, water bottle out. Ribbit. No broken pride, just bent elbows. You kept your brand. He took the water. He'll hate me less for it tomorrow. Ribbit. Doubt, she said, then added, but less dangerous hate. He snorted, then hiss. Ed as the post-adrenal ache behind his eyes pricked. Not a migraine, the cost meter ticking like a fair judge. He'd kept the violet out. Good. The dial turned itself to ready without his hand. Up in the shade, Aizawa's scarf whispered nothing helpful whatsoever. His eyes did the approving ghost. Dark corridor. The festival day wore on, all drums and sugar. Between matches the athletes' tunnel exhaled quieter air. Izuku stripped his gloves off to rub circulation back into his fingers when a stagehand rounded the corner too fast and collided with his shoulder. A padded case tumbled, clattered, popped open like a bad secret. Inside, glass and rings. Not as large as the one Snipe had inspected. Smaller, meaner, tucked into a hand mount like a brace. Etched circles begging for light. Sorry, the stagehand blurted, scrambling. Man, could you? I'm supposed to deliver this stabilizer to medical. For your eyes, I mean for eye fatigue. I heard you looked pale and... Bait. Everything a boo. Tia was wrong. The vest hung right but the boots were silent, rubber too new. The apology had the rhythm of a man reading a room, not feeling it. And the word stabilizer was the most desperate lie a trap could pick. Izuku didn't touch the case. He didn't even look at the lens. He adjusted his stance, visible to the dome camera, and raised his hand to stretch again. 3 tiny finger motions like a boy loosening his shoulders. A breath later Edge shot was a thread in the corner of Izuku's vision. Another breath and Aizawa was at the far end of the corridor, scarf lifting without moving, eyes sober. Permit, Aizawa said, flat as asphalt. The not stagehand smiled badly and went for the scramble, trying to kick the case shut and away in the same motion. Edge shot was the floor in the air, and then a man again with the case already sealed under his arm and the would-be courier already banded at the wrists with blue nylon. It looked like it had always been that way. Tell your buyer the sun is up, Aizawa said mildly to the man blinking at his suddenly ruined day. Erasure didn't flare. He didn't need it. Edge shot glanced at Izuku, a question with a period. Izuku kept his eyes on anything but the glass and said, clearly enough for the camera to hear, if the save is laced with bait, I call for backup. Aizawa's mouth almost smiled. Good classroom policy. The courier got add his rights in a tone that made rights sound like ambulances. Loud, necessary, unwelcome. Edge shot folded into thread and left with the case for the light. Aizawa tilted his head at Izuku. Hydrate. Yes, sir, Izuku said, and did. He didn't write the rule down until later. He didn't need to. It had carved itself into his bones. The brackets kept spinning. Todoroki advanced on the other side with a clean, colder wind that didn't feel like capitulation. Bakugo blew through his next opponent with less shouting and more geometry than usual, like anger had learned a word or two. The crowd carried them all on sugar and breath. Izuku sat for a minute alone in the shade, leaf on his forehead like an old joke, ice hero string looped around his fingers. He breathed the disc to stillness, then to spin, then to stillness again. Idle, he told the violet, and it listened because now it knew how. He opened his notebook and wrote, in a hand steadier than yesterday. New rule: if the save is laced with bait, call the needle in the sun. I am not a vault for other people's traps. He underlined not. He looked up. The stadium roared for someone else for a while. It was nice, being one boy in the noise. Suyu plopped beside him without asking, chin propped on her hands. Ribbit, want me to critique your form or your handwriting? Surprise me, he said. Form, she decided. Still too much elbow. He corrected it. The gyro stopped wobbling. The day kept moving. UA's hallways turned into a marketplace of futures overnight. Agency flyers, glossy posters with mission photos, third ye. R's swaggering past first years with your not ready yet grins. Iida paced with a clipboard. Uraraka oscillated between 3 hero offices like a particle deciding. And Todoroki took a pamphlet he CL. Early didn't need and folded it along a perfect crease. Izuku didn't shop. He walked to Aizawa's desk, placed a single form down, and said, Edge Shot Agency. Aizawa glanced over the paper. The needle, he said, as if he were naming a weather front. He signed with a patient flick. Boundaries: you and I agreed on travel with you. If something smells like bait, you step back and call it in. Yes, sir. Aizawa slid a second sheet across. And a thing you didn't ask for. I flagged your file for energy migraine accommodations. If you need to sit, you sit. Edge Shot won't need it. UA bureaucracy will. One corner of his mouth did something less like a smile and more like a sigh that changed its mind. Make the paperwork worth it. I'll try to be boring, Izuku said. Good luck, Aizawa said, deadpan. You're magnetized. Edge Shot's agency lobby didn't look like a lobby. It looked like someone had taught a pin to be a room. Clean lines, quiet light, a table with tea placed. Exactly where your hand would want to find it. Saya met Izuku with a bow you could measure angles off. Welcome to needlework, she said, entirely serious. Shinya waited in the ops room before a wall that was more map than wall. Red thread and thin wire stitched cities together. Ports, pawnshops, cultural brokerages, shell LLCs with names like Nine Petals Import, then ran inland along rail spurs and mountain roads. A ring of photos anchored each node. Grainy stills of cloaks, counterfeit seals, and, in 2 shots, Glassmonger's 2 new boots. Relic Nine's pipeline, Shinya said. They buy myths, sell theater, and hide the real thing in the B-roll. This, he tapped a glowing pin inland, is a depot we'll starve later. Today we nibble at their beachhead. Bathhouse Zeta, abandoned on paper, paying water bills in cash. Old onsen? Izuku asked, half a smile tugging. Hard water stains and secrets. Saya handed him a pouch. Salt and chalk, and a new toy. Inside, a thin, flexible ice scribe, clear polymer handle. Needle fine tip, meant to freeze a hairline where you touched. No points for pretty, she said. We just want the lines to tell you where not to step. Shinya pointed at a photo clipped to the side. A palm-sized plate covered in triangles. They've started using Kagome snares, woven trip geometries. Not chakra, but mean math. If you push on any one vertex, the lattice, he steals your push and throws it somewhere else. We'll spend it early, not late. Izuku felt the field behind his eyes hum interestedly. Idle, he told it, and it sat. Bathhouse Zeta crouched in a bar. CK Street like a memory. Faded Norin flapping with no heat behind them. A ticket window with a polite crack, tiles old enough to remember laughter. The "closed for renovation" sign had been new 3 times already. Edge Shot didn't kick doors. He slid through them like an apology. Izuku and Saya followed, the room breathing dust. The women's side smelled like old cedar. The men's side smelled like someone had boiled tea here 10,000 mornings and then stopped. Back, Saya said quietly. Service corridor. A sliding panel opened onto a narrow hall that bent right then left like an old man's joints. The corridor had been rebuilt too cleanly, fresh joists that didn't match old wood. Izuku set his palm to the floor and felt it. Tension braided into the space, Not a single tripwire but a woven net of pressure plates and steel strands waiting to share force. He knelt. Kagome, he murmured. Triangles nested in triangles. The Kagome lattice that made baskets strong and traps patient. A fake seal tag perched on a beam ahead. Etched wrong but humming anyway. Don't break it, Shinya said from above his shoulder. Spend it. Izuku took out Saya's chalk and drew a tiny triangle on the tile beside the lattice and then a line toward one vertex. The chalk line looked like nothing. The field felt like something. A place to pour a push that wouldn't slingshot back into his face. He set the ice scribe against a hairline gap between tile and joist and breathed a whisper of frost into it. Just enough to make the wood announce itself. Fiber by fiber, resistance by resistance. The traps. Steel strands sang in the kind of voice only your knuckles hear. He mapped the song. 3 anchors, one brittle with age, one new, one wrong. Drilled at a lazy angle. That one, he said, pointing with the scribe. Lazy anchor. They trusted the pattern to carry them. He drew a second chalk line toward it. Spend here. He asked the field for 1 thumb of push, not to trip the snare but to make it settle early into his chalk geometry. The lattice obliged with a shiver, tension migrating along the path he'd drawn like water taking a gutter. The wrong anchor groaned, gave a polite metallic plink, and sat down. The web relaxed a degree. He didn't grin. He salted the tile, laid a narrow ice rib under the lazy anchor so the metal's next decision would be to rest, and then inched forward on his palms, breath-counting beats. Twice he felt the violet press against his attention like a cat at a door. Twice he said not now and it sat, tail tidy. Saya eased a crate out with gloved fingers. Shiny. Slid a slender fiber camera into a vent and watched a live feed on his phone, jaw an unreadable line. We have 3, he said. 1 crate of counterfeit tags that would impress a 9th grader. 1 crate of beads and rings that will impress a bored professor. 1 crate of nothing, which is what worries me. They opened the nothing crate last. Under a false floor. A book, handbound, more drawings than text. Circles inside circles, not the Rinnegan's clean truths but interpretations, the kind you get when you look too long at a thing you can't hold. Saya flipped pages with tweezers. Index, she said, lens projects, a sketch labeled echo lens. Not an amplifier, an oscillator. Rings to make rings answer. Feedback loop, Izuku said, stomach tightening. Not louder, self-sustaining. Yo, you start a pull and the room starts pulling back. Shinya's mouth thinned. You never touch it, he said, a familiar oath in a cooler tone. You never let it near you. If they wave it, we smash it or steal it. He didn't ask Izuku to repeat it this time. He knew he didn't have to. They bagged the book, logged the counterfeits, left the heavy beads for formal seizure. As they turned, Izuku felt the corridor tilt a millimeter in his bones, like someone a hallway away had just put a foot down carefully. Relic 9 didn't send amateurs to check on precious rooms. Shinya said nothing out loud. His hand made a line. Withdraw quiet. They did, inch by inch, buying space with salt and chalk lines and breath. At the door, a shadow crossed the Norin. A soft voice, masculine, unhurried. The water's closed today. Shinya swept into thread and reappeared behind the voice before the last syllable finished, hand a blur. The man went to the floor without argument, wrists neatly shawled in nylon. No cloak, no boots, a caretaker with hands that didn't know mops and a mouth that knew passwords. Not glassmonger, another petal. Izuku exhaled the field back to idle. His head felt clear and tired the way solving a proof makes you tired. They left the bathhouse cleaner than they found it. The new wood still knew it had been seen. After looked like paperwork and tea, the kind you drink in silence while the color returns to your hands. Saya catalogued. The city police took custody in the public way. A smaller, nameless courier took the book in the quiet way. You okay? Shinya asked, not looking away from the map. I wanted to look longer, Izuku admitted, and didn't mean the book. He meant the lattice, the way the world brightened when he listened right. But the urge felt like the lens, like echo trying to start. Name it, Shinya said. Temptation with good manners, Izuku said. Says please while it ruins you. Shinya's mouth almost curved. That's older than your eyes. Izuku's phone buzzed with a frog emoji. Ribbit, picked Sea Rescue Agency. Boat rides and weather. You? He snapped a photo of his tea and the edge of a map. Needlework, he typed. We poked a bathhouse and it confessed. A minute later she sent back a sticker of a frog saluting a sewing needle. He laughed into his cup, headache hovering but not landing. Aizawa texted near dusk. Check in. Pulse, Izuku. Ready. 0 big violet, 4 micro push. 1 lattice solve. Aizawa. Don't make me learn your jargon. Sleep. Izuku. Yes, sir. 2 nights later, needlework ran a quiet intercept on the mountain road Shinya had pinned inland. The depot looked like a forgotten ski shop. Plywood on windows, a snow thrower sulking beside a door. 4 vans in, 2 out, a smoke break at the wrong time for the same guard 3 days in a row. They didn't go in loud. Snipe's team did the lawful knock. Edge Shot's line was the seam under a door, the breath between boards, the moment a lock sits deciding. The room opened around them like a throat. Crates everywhere, some labeled with antiques chains, some blank. In a rear bay, under a tarp, something round slept in foam. A lens big enough to crown a man if he were the sort who wanted crowns. Etches fine as hair. It didn't hum. The silence around it made sound behave. Izuku didn't step closer. He didn't need to. The field behind his eyes leaned like a dog smelling rain through a window. He pictured the dial resolve and turned it to idle. The lean softened. Saya's scan wand clicked near the lens. No power. No active field, she murmured. But the glass is hungry. It wants a voice to copy. Echo. He tasted the word and didn't like it. Bag the book, tag the fakes, photograph the lens, don't touch, Shinya said. A simple liturgy. Snipe called in a crate team in the public way. Aizawa. Yes, Aizawa. Stood in the shadow near the door, scarf at his neck. A teacher supervising a lab exercise where the acid might jump bowls. On the way out, Izuku felt the room pus. Back in a way he couldn't name yet. Like a song stuck in a wall that wanted a throat. He didn't offer one. Outside, mountain air tasted like old ice and laws that still worked. Edge Shot walked with him to the van. You'll be asked to show the violet more now, he said. You said no to spectacle at the festival. Say no to panic here. We'll raid as Needle and Sun, not Storm. I can do that, Izuku said. And believed it more tonight than he had last week. Good, Shinya said, because the storm is coming anyway. Let it find you precise. They drove back under a sky so full of stars it looked. Like someone had spilled salt and never cleaned it up. Izuku rolled the ice scribe between his fingers until it felt like a pen he'd always owned. At home he opened his notebook and wrote 3 things. Lessons. Kagome snares spend if you give them somewhere honest to go. Echo isn't louder, it's longer. Don't start songs you can't stop. If a room makes silence behave, leave it for the sun and the needle. He closed the book on those lines and slept without dreams, the violet breathing quietly behind his eyes like a cat on a radiator, warm. Present, not in charge. News didn't need to be true to change a city. It only needed to be loud. The word stain rippled down Musudafu's spine like a chill, and sud. Enly every alley had a sermon and every cheap knife thought it was philosophy. Edge Shot's briefing was 1 line. Save first. Argue never. That evening the canal lights shivered on. An internship. Cross-call pinged through 3 agencies at once. Hostage, under the Kureji footbridge. Suspect broadcasting on a phone. Crowd forming. The sea rescue skiff bumped the mooring with a soft donk and Tsuyu climbed onto the stones. Eyes already mapping exits. Izuku came in on a side street with Edge Shot's courier van. Shinya vanished to rooftops the way ink disappears into paper. The scene was a knot. A man in a cheap full face mask. Red paint streaked like a sneer. One arm locked clumsily around a junior hero's shoulders. Knife pressed in the dangerous maybe zone. His phone streamed. Comments bubbled up the screen like oil. False heroes. Blood tax. Watch me cleanse. Crowd pressure murmured. Somebody lit a trash can like a bad idea. A drone hovered too low. Sirens were coming. Sirens always took longer than a knife. Tsuyu was already moving. Ribbit. Angle 1, she breathed. She didn't wait for permission, because you don't wait to breathe. Izuku slid into the channel where the crowd's fear had pooled. His field woke. Idle. Idle. And he laid a quiet wedge under the trash fire's plume, coaxing the heat to spend itself up and away before it could lick a banner. The flame dimmed like someone had remembered their manners. He set an air shoulder under the drone and lifted it 1/2 meter. The operator, startled, pulled back to legal height without knowing why. The copycat ranted. Why? Oh, you think you can smile for the cameras in. You can stop, the hostage said, voice shaking but iron under it. You're not him. That flickered the knife hand. Just for a breath. Izuku used that breath. He tilted the pavement by a whisper towards Tsuyu. 1 degree, like a suggestion. The man compensated with his knee without knowing he had. His stance opened a sliver at the back. Ribbit, now, Tsuyu said. Her tongue snapped, not to the knife, not to the man's wrist, but to the empty belt loop at his hip. She pulled emptiness. His hips jerked a fraction. The blade drifted away from skin, and eye. In the same heartbeat Izuku asked the air to push there, a thumbprint of pressure on the back of the hand. Just enough to make the knife choose gravity. It clattered harmlessly. The crowd gasped. The man flailed for dignity and found none. Izuku didn't slam him. He spent his balance a little at a time. An ankle whisper, a harmless slick of ice the size of a coin. And the man knelt like the ground had done him a favor. Tsuyu flowed past, gathering the hostage with a firm ribbit and a shoulder offered at exactly the right height. Sirens found them at last and weren't needed. Aizawa materialized Oma direction that hadn't existed a second ago, scarf unwinding with the authority of a comma. He said nothing to the kneeling man. He looked instead at the crowd and said, calmly, back. Give breath. The words worked like weather. The drone hissed away. The trash consigned itself to sleep. A few zealots in cheap masks booed and then remembered homework and mothers and disappeared into the human ocean. Edge Shot reappeared as a man. Stream, he said softly, eyes on the phone. The suspect had dropped it. Comments still spilled. Cowards. Stainwood. This is staged. Lame. A thumb pressed a red button. The sermon ended. No victory cheer, just relief setting bones back into their sockets. The junior hero, cape crooked, heart straight, looked at Izuku and Tsuyu in that stunned way people do when the worst possible version of a thing didn't happen. Thank you, he said, and then, firmer, thank you. Ribbit. Drink water, Tsuyu said, deadpan, and someone laughed because the world had resumed being real. They were almost clear when help tried to find Izuku. A man in a windbreaker eased sideways through the dispersing crowd, holding up a charm threaded on cord. Paper ring around a bead, ink too dark, lines too confident. Hey, he said, kid, Midoriya, right? You look pale. This stabilizer's for ocular fatigue. My cousin's a specialist. The cord brushed Izuku's peripheral vision like a fishing line. The field behind his eyes leaned. He didn't look at it. He lifted both hands to stretch, casual, 3-finger twitches in the language of certain cameras. I'm not taking gifts, he said, tone kind and public. Please keep the walkway clear. The man smiled a practiced nothing and adjusted his angle to remain in Izuku's space. The cord swung. Edge Shot was thread and then hand. The charm lived in a clear bag. The man lived against a wall, wrists briefly knitting themselves to the brick with nylon. It looked like choreography. Maybe it was. Aizawa stepped between Izuku and the man, not even bothering to lift his hair. His eyes said no without saying anything. He looked at Izuku a beat longer than necessary. You did it right. And then at Edge Shot. Son's here, he said. Needle, take his sewing kit. They walked away without a lecture, which was a lecture of its own. Tsuyu drifted up on Izuku's left, eyes canted sideways. Ribbit, bait with good manners. Please and thank you while it ruins you, he said. Ribbit, classic. They stood for a second and let their pulses admit they had been high. The city exhaled with them. Later, in a classroom that FTER hours pretended to be a kitchen, fluorescents buzzing, a kettle thinking about boiling, Aizawa leaned against the counter and told Izuku a story without warning. Present Mike gave me my name, he said, eyes on a teabag sinking. He thought it was funny. Eraserhead. I hated it. It felt like a threat disguised as a joke. I didn't want to be the man who erases people. He glanced over, mouth almost a line, almost a curve. I picked how it meant something. I erase risk, not who. I erase a moment long enough to give someone a different one. That's the job. You can't stop people from naming you. You can decide what the named is in your hands. Izuku felt the violet sitting behind his eyes like a patient cat, listening. He could already hear what the internet would call him if they got a good angle one day. Names with more storm than person in them. He didn't want a storm. He wanted room. I'll choose how it means something, he said, surprised at how simple it felt to say it. Pull to save, push to make room. Words after. Aizawa's scarf shifted. It might have been approval. It might have been a draft. Good order, he said. Then, the smallest raise of brow. Eat, he added, because teachers never run out of the right verbs. Edge Shot's text arrived when the kettle clicked. Charm was an echo toy. Not live. Hungry glass. You didn't look. Keep not looking. Izuku turned his head and looked at Tsuyu instead. She was demolishing a convenience store onigiri with the steady focus of a professional. She caught him staring, blinked. Ribbit. What? Nothing, he said. That's the right order too. On the canal, a wake touched stone and smoothed. Under the footbridge, chalk scuffs faded. A phone stream lost to 1,000 other trivialities. The shadow of stain remained. What it had been before a kid painted his face and went hunting with borrowed words. A shadow, not a prophecy. Control wasn't a cage. It was a door you chose to open exactly as far as someone needed to get through. And tonight, when fear banged on it, Izuku let it in only long enough to hand it a glass of water and send it back outside. Principal Nezu called it a composite readiness assessment. Aizawa called it no good choices. The board on the wall called it urban knot in stenciled letters, and underneath, in smaller type, objective, evacuate, contain, stabilize, score penalties for collateral and spectacle. They'd reconfigured Training Ground Gamma into a glass and brick maze. Atrium with a hanging sign, 2 narrow streets hemmed by mock storefronts, a skybridge riddled with hairline cracks. A plaza seeded with safe but heavy debris. Volunteers in neon vests wore civilian bibs and practiced panic. Somewhere, All Might was off-duty security, which meant a smiling problem. Aizawa briefed from a catwalk. You'll run in squads of 4. Time limit, 12 minutes. Midway, assume an aftershock. No area of effect. My sensors will flag you if you treat the city like a toy. His eyes slid to Izuku and back. Save first, argue later. Izuku's squad. Tsuyu, Iida, and Jiro. Good lungs, good legs, good ears. He flexed his fingers, felt the field stir behind his eyes, and set it to idle. The violet waited, polite. The horn snapped. They flowed through the atrium doors into a churn of voices. The hanging sign, a ridiculous, beautiful slab of faux glass, swayed dangerously above a knot of shoppers. A cracked hydrant hissed, slicking tiles. A toddler wailed near a planter twice her size. Priorities, Iida barked. Ribbit, sign and child, Tsuyu said, already bounding. Crowd lanes, Izuku said. Jiro, sing me the weak panel. Copy, she said, tapping her jacks to the floor. Right suspension bolt, hairline wine. Left is honest. He didn't throw a push. He made room. A quiet ramp rose under the crowd's feet. 1-degree tilt that turned panic into a walk toward wide doors. He flashed both palms at eye level, this way, and laid visible ice arrows along the tile so cameras had something to bless. The toddler's mother caught the cue and swept her kid to the exit like a pro. 2 civilians stumbled. Izuku salted the tile, laid grippy pads under their soles. So their mistakes didn't turn into a pile. The sign swayed further, cable creaking. The easy answer, the loud answer, was to bark back. And shove it into obedience. The violet licked his attention, eager. He chose the hard answer. Jiro, count, he called. I'll preload the bad bolt. Tsuyu, when I say now, you give me 10 kilos of down on the left. He slid onto the mezzanine rail, ice-scribed. A hair-thin line into the right bolt's cradle, and breathed frost into it, not to snap it, but to announce its limit. 3, 2, now, Tsuyu said, and hopped, exactly the weight he asked. Izuku tilted air along the sign's path so its next sway spent itself early against a soft post of ice he'd grown from a column. It kissed, complained, and settled into a gentler arc. He looped an ice skyline over the left cable and anchored it to a stanchion he'd salted for honesty. The sign hung chastened. The crowd's heartbeat calmed. They cut down a side street. A storefront with a fake gas explosion. Burned, happily. Smoke machine and heat lamps. 2 students in reflective vests waved, eyes wide. My friends are inside. Ribbit. Jiro? Tsuyu asked. Jiro's jacks hummed along the door. 2 heartbeats, calm but coughing, back right. Ceiling fan motor is whining. Bearings miserable. Izuku raised a hand and stroked the heat plume, the way Shinya had taught him. Soften and drink. The hot air wasn't a quirk, it was engineering. He robbed the column of its teeth, then laid a transparent veil of ice above the doorway to snub the convection without collapsing anything. Iida. Door. Tsuyu. Line. They flowed. Iida kicked clean. Tsuyu tongue lashed the line to a shelf. The 2 civilians, crab walked out on their own legs, coughing laughs. No one tripped, no one screamed. Izuku's dial stayed on ready. The aftershock hit on cue. The whole ground shivered with hidden hydraulics. The skybridge groaned overhead, dropping a fist-sized facade panel. The audience's gasp had music in it. Off-duty S. Akira T. All Might stepped into the plaza, waving gallantly. Fear not. The fallen panel pinged off the stone and skidded toward a civilian's shin. Izuku's hand twitched. The violet rose. Not people. Move the world. He tilted the stone by a breath. The panel chose the gutter he'd salted with chalk earlier and stopped at a catchpad like it always meant to. The civilian blinked at his intact leg, then beamed. Izuku smiled back once and kept moving. Aizawa's scarf flickered. Somewhere a sensor decided not to ping. All Might, playing his part, bounded up the skybridge with a theatrical hop that set the hairline crack singing. The bridge didn't like it. 2 bolts groaned. Izuku had a breath to choose the easy answer. Shout and shove the whole thing back into place with a lord's hand, or the hard one. Jiro, count me a beat, he called. She tapped the rail. Tick, tick, tick. Izuku planted 3 ice props under the bridge's midspan where the harmonics shivered nastiest. He didn't yaw. Them hard. He just asked them to be present. He laid expansion lines along the underside with the scribe so the stress would take the long way home. Then he did something he hadn't tried outside try. Ning. He tilted the sound. A wedge of air that stole a decibel from the resonance peak. The creak flattened from a knife to a butter spreader. The skybridge sulked and held. All Might, giant smile steady, caught Izuku's eye down below. You've got it, young man. And made a show of directing a tour group to a safer staircase. Time bled. 5 minutes left. They still needed a contain. At the end of the block, villains in blue windbreakers had staged a truck leak, harmless theater foam pretending to be caustic. It oozed toward a drain where it would poison the fake river and cost them 15 points if it reached the grate. Iida revved, itching to sprint and plug it with his body. Izuku hooked 2 fingers in his sleeve. Don't spend your knees, spend the flow. He tilted the street by raindrop increments, laying a web of micro gutters that suggested a different path. He built a low ice sill at the grate, barely there, and salted it so the foam's surface tension kissed and clung. The ooze slithered into his geometry, slowed, pooled, and stopped. Tsuyu flicked a signboard into a better dam. Jiro thunked a trash can into the right gap. The truck leak became a polite puddle. Aizawa's voice clicked in over the PA. 2 minutes. Surprise rule. 1 squad member's quirk is now offline. His hair rose. Erasure tasted the air. Izuku's eyes softened, lights in his nerves dimming without panic. Good. Wanted. Iida. Engines. Jiro. Ears up. Tsuyu. You with me. Quirkless didn't mean helpless. The framework stayed. He tilted air without asking the violet for anything but a whisper. Set ramps for feet. Met a stumbling extra with a forearm in the right place so physics took the blame. He salted where traction lied. Tsuyu did the muscle work. Frogs are honest. She hopped, hauled, steadied. Iida became a barricade with a smile. Jiro kept time and truth. The last snag was designed to be a cheat. A 2-ton facade slab loosened itself from a storefront and decided, with perfect drama, to fall toward the last half-dozen stragglers. The easy answer, the one Nezu had dressed the exam to tempt, was a glorious Shinra Tensai to blow the slab back into place and victory into the stands. The violet stood behind his eyes, hands folded, waiting for yes. No, Izuku said, and meant it. He sprinted under the fall line and planted 5 ice nails, just dots of cold into pre-drilled anchors, then vented air across the slab's face upward like a dozen invisible spotters putting fingertips under the weight. Tsuyu, left, he said, and she leaned a shoulder into a rope he'd conjured out of nothing but angle and honesty. Iida, right, and Iida became a post with human legs. Jiro, count, 4, 3, 2. He spent the slab's swing in inches, not meters. It didn't stop, it agreed to pause. He made the last 2 inches last a century and then set the weight down onto the nails so gently that even the censors had to admit they'd seen something better than strong. The horn ended the world. The crowd thought it had been holding its breath for 12 minutes. It found out it had been holding it for years. They stood there, hands on each other's shoulders, grinning like idiots. Aizawa's boots came into view. He didn't clap. His eyes did a more extravagant version of their approving ghost. Pass, he said. Then, quieter, to Izuku alone. You chose the hard way when the easy one would have made you famous. Good. Quote. Izuku felt the violet bow and returned to idle without being told. It felt like trust, his in it, and it's in him. All Might boomed from a balcony, bravo. And somehow made it sound like a father proud of any kid who learned where to put their hands. Nezu's smile was a puzzle piece that would never stop being a puzzle. Jiro bumped Izuku's shoulder with her knuckles. Nice tempo. Iida vibrated with relief like a polite washing machine. Tsuyu just said, ribbit, clean, and the word landed like a medal. They debriefed with water and simple food. Aizawa point. Ed at the replay when the facade slab hovered, then landed like a sleeping giant being tucked in. That, he said, to the whole class, is what I mean by save first, argue later. He didn't look at Izuku as he said it. He didn't need to. On the way back to the lockers, Izuku caught his reflection in a window. Hair mussed, eyes green and ordinary. The glass showed the stadium behind him, the skybridge mended, people walking like people. He lifted a hand. The boy in the glass lifted a hand. No rings, no storm, just room. In the hallway's hush, his phone buzzed. A leaf emoji from Needle and a Sue. An emoji from someone who didn't use emojis. He smiled, put the phone away, and didn't feel the itch to write anything down. The lesson had already written itself in the way his breath sat easy in his chest. Ribbit, Tsuyu said, nudging him toward the light. Curry? Always, he said. They went to eat like teenagers who just kept a city on its feet and didn't need to say it out loud. They hit the mountain at dusk, when the granite turned the color of old tea and the road forgot it had lines. Public teams boxed the highway with cones and vests and clipboards. Private teams skimmed the treeline like punctuation. Sun and Needle, Snipe and Edge Shot, took the front. Aizawa walked in the quiet middle, scarf asleep at his neck. Izuku rode 2 steps behind, pulse low, the field behind his eyes set to idle. The depot had once been a ski rental. Now it was glass over plywood, polite lights behind blackout film, a tasteful sign that said closed in a font that meant go away. They didn't knock loud. Edge Shot exhaled and became a line under the door. Snipe's palm skimmed the handle, holster heavy, hat brim lower than usual. Aizawa flexed one hand. The hallway air held its breath. Inside was geometry, not a warehouse, a room. Large, circular, the walls inlaid with mirror petals tilted in a way that made light go on errands and return changed. In the center, a gimbaled mount like a music stand had made a deal with a gyroscope. On it, asleep under a veil of breathable fabric, something round waited. Lens. Glassmonger was here. Vest right, boots wrong by a millimeter if you knew how boxes moved. With him, a thin man in a gray cardigan whose hands didn't know calluses. He stood like a librarian at the wrong desk. Archivist, Izuku named him privately. Police, Snipe drawled, which meant don't run. Renovation inspection. Archivist smiled like a man who practiced in mirrors. We closed early. Edge Shot ghosted back into a man between Archivist and the door. We opened late, he said. Aizawa's hair rose a centimeter. Don't. Glassmonger's palms lifted. He didn't go for a weapon that wouldn't help. Archivist didn't either. He reached for the veil. Don't, Aizawa repeated, not louder, lower. Archivist lifted anyway. The Rinne focus lens wasn't big. Dinner plate, maybe. Thin. Clear the way snow is clear when it's about to become a river. Concentric etches, nested across it like whispers organized into a cathedral. It didn't hum. The room hummed. The mirror petals kissed the air. The floor carried a faint standing wave. The suggestion of a note that hadn't been sung yet. Izuku felt the field behind his eyes lean, as if the room itself had turned its head toward him. Idle, he told it. The lean softened, then returned, polite, insistent. Archivist G. Lanced at Izuku like a teacher waiting for a prodigy to read aloud. You'll want to look, he said softly. It's made for you to look. I don't take gifts, Izuku said, and looked at anything else, the screws on the mount. The twin rails of power couplers feeding the gimbal, the way the mirror petals' angles coincided with the lens rings like a choir leaning into the right chord. Snipe moved to bag the glass. Archivist's expression didn't even change. He flicked a wall switch with a knuckle. Sound arrived, not volume, permission. A subsonic pulse strobed through the room. The mirror petals shifted 3 degrees. The gimbal's gyros kissed into motion. The lens answered with a breathing you could taste. Izuku's field tried to stand. He sat it back down hard. Echo, he said, because naming things steals power from panic. Turn it off. Archivist smiled with his eyes. It is off, he said, and meant it. The switch hadn't powered the lens, it had tuned the room. Snipe swore under his breath. Edge shot became a thread and found 2 plugs. They weren't the plugs that mattered. The angles mattered, the mirrors mattered, the air mattered. Deku, Aizawa said, not to order him forward, just to put him in his own feet. Permission and leash in one syllable. Izuku stepped in far enough to see, not be seen by the glass. The pulse stroked his molars. He watched a dust mote's path be. ND and knew any push he threw at the lens would come back longer than he sent it. Echo, not louder, longer. He changed the room. He didn't touch the lens. He didn't look at it. He broke the choir. First, the air. He spread his fingers and laid soft wedges up near the ceiling, barely there, subtle as a shrug. Micro tilts that misaligned the mirror pedal's shared angle. The next pulse smudged on contact, spending itself finding new paths. Second, the mount. He slid ice into screws he had no right to be touching, a gram at a time. Ice swells like good gossip. A millimeter is an earthquake to precision. The gimbal's perfect circle became an imperfect oval. The lens, breath, tripped over itself and wheezed. Third, the floor. He salted exactly 6 tiles and grew honeycomb under them. Wafer-thin ice cells that collapse on command. When the next pulse rolled, he let the cells give, turning ring into mud. The wave lost its appetite. Glassmonger twitched like a wolf denied meat. Archivist's calm frayed at the edges. He touched a second switch. The room offered more note. Izuku answered with more wrong. He pulled the fire extinguisher's pins, venting CO into the room in a polite blizzard. Air's density changed. Sound forgot its math. He didn't flood the lens. He let the medium lie instead. It started to work. The pulse arrived tired. The mirrors sulked. The gimbal stuttered. Arch. IVIST glided 2 steps and snapped a paper tag to the floor with 1 finger. The circle inked on it didn't get wet in the snow of CO. Anti-adhesion. The honeycomb lost its purchase at the worst tile. The pulse woke a little. Edge shot threaded the tag off the floor mid-flip and tucked it into a clear bag with the weary grace of a man who has already sorted his recycling. Snipe's rope loop kissed Glassmonger's wrists because someone needed to be a problem and it might as well be solved. The lens was still answering. Not bubbling, not blasting, but answering. Ribbit. Left wall, Tsuyu said in Izuku's earpiece. He'd forgotten he had the earpiece in. She'd come up the back hall with a sea rescue liaison to watch the drain angle in case someone popped a rear door and ran downhill with a myth. Now her voice cut clean. Angle 4. See the pedal with the stain? Tilt it and the note goes broken. Copy. Izuku breathed. He didn't push the pedal. He tilted the air under its bracket so the bracket's weight remembered gravity. The pedal sagged a polite half-degree. The room sighed. The echo fractured a little more. Archivist gave up on switches and moved with sudden arrogance of a very Hin man who had never been shoved by weather. He reached toward the lens like a lover who'd read too much poetry. Edge shot moved to stop him and paused. A line does not love becoming paste against glass. Aizawa's hair rose. Erasure tasting the room. He could erase quirks, not rooms. Izuku reached without reaching. He moved the room under Archivist's feet, tilted the tile a half-degree and slicked it the size of a coin. Archivist's shoe agreed with physics and asked his ankle a rude question. He stumbled, not far, not cinematic, just enough that his hand kissed the mount, not the glass. The gimbal flinched. The oval caught. The pulse missed time. Now, Snipe said, and 4 gloved hands, his, Atek's, Edge shots, Aizawa's, came down on the mount's hardware, not the lens, with the banal holiness of closing a suitcase. Izuku fed a breath of ice into a screw and it crossed that last honest line between tight and stuck. The gimbal stopped. The silence that followed didn't rush in. It settled, like the room finally remembered it had nothing to say. Archivist looked very, very small without a choir to help him. Glassmonger looked exactly the size of a man whose boots had never fit the job. Bag it, Snipe said. And the pros did. The lens went into a coffin built for things that behave badly. Not near Izuku. Aizawa positioned himself casually in the line of sight, a shade for the bow. Why he was supervising. Teacher as a cult sunblock. Archivist tried one last performance. You people don't understand what you're holding, he said, voice airy with contempt. You should beg it for language. Aizawa didn't blink. I erase mistakes, he said mildly. This room is one. Edge Shot's eyes flicked to Izuku. He hadn't used the violet. Not once. The rings sat behind his eyes, hands folded. A guest who had learned when to be quiet. Izuku dipped his head to the power that had listened. Thank you for waiting. They walked out the way they came. Down the hall, the service door opened. NTO, the blue-black evening and the smell of pine. Suyu leaned against the frame, rain jacket zipped, eyes a calm mirror. You okay? She asked. Yeah, he said, surprised to find it true. It wanted me to look. Ribbit. Good thing you like being rude, she said, and they both laughed, relief coming out of their noses like steam. On the blacktop, Snipe slid the coffin into a truck whose paint didn't reflect cameras. Edge Shot signed 3 forms in 4 seconds without lifting his eyes. Aizawa stood with his hands in his pockets and the posture of a man who had decided not to trust gravity just because it claimed to be a law. Archivist watched all of it with a small, infuriating confidence that didn't belong to the moment. It took Izuku a second to place the feeling. Archivist wasn't watching the lens go. He was watching the holes it had left in them. Temptations, almost choices. Doors they might open later on purpose and call it necessity. Izuku met his eyes and said nothing. Some arguments die of thirst if you don't water them. They loaded up. The mountain turned its back into night. Needle and Sun didn't celebrate. They drove. In the passenger seat, Izuku held the ice scree in his lap and stared at the little clear needle until the world stopped feeling like it had edges where there shouldn't be any. He didn't write anything down when he got home. He didn't need to. Lesson had already made a home in his wrists. Break the room, not yourself. Take the note, not the bait. Never look just because something asks you to. The night after the depot raid, Musudafu wore a soft rain. Streetlights made coins on the pavement. The coins shivered when cars passed. Izuku's apartment was quiet enough to hear the kettle think. He clicked the gas off with his thumb, poured hot water over the teabag. And the white static arrived like dust in sunlight, innocent, everywhere. He sat down before the chair moved under him. It wasn't pain, not yet. It was afterlight, a grainy shimmer in the corners of his vision. The kind that made print buzz and edges breathe. The field behind his eyes stayed obediently idle, but his skull had decided to hum alone. Photophobia. Light had corners he could feel. He dimmed the lamp and did what Shinya had drilled for nights like this. The 12th of December 12. 12 seconds eyes closed in the dark. 12 slow breaths, counted from the belly. 12 seconds leaf balance on his brow. Just enough chakra to remind the body there was a different circuit than panic. The static receded a degree, like a stubborn guest stepping off the welcome mat but not leaving the house. His phone buzzed, a message from Needle. Cost, Izuku typed. One thumb, squinting. Afterlight. Static. No pulse. No violet. A moment later. Hard cap holds. 3 big in 90, or 2 if the room sings. Today was 0. Respect the 0 anyway. Salt plus protein. Dark in 10. No doom scrolling. Name the save. Then sleep. He smiled at the no doom scrolling. He wasn't going to. N.O.T. when the corners of his vision looked like tiny strobe lights hidden in the paint. He wrote the save quietly, on paper with a dull pencil because the soft line didn't shout. Broke the choir, not my head. Then he turned the lights off and let the rain do the rest. When the static came back at 2 a.m., he didn't fight it. He greeted it like a weather report and let it pass. By morning, the world's edges were polite again. Edge Shot's clinic smelled like warm wood and electrolytes. Izuku sat on the padded mat while Saya slid a penlight across his gaze with a clinician's distance and a big sister's worry. Photophobia is a love letter from your neurons, she said dryly. They are excited to exist and do not want a concert right now. She tapped a chart. We'll formalize your hard limits. Shinya came in like a line that had read the note and decided not to be brittle. He squatted so their eyes were level. 3 surges in 90 minutes is the line we suspected, he said. We'll make it official. If the white static nibble hits, you stop. No bargaining, no, just one more push. If you hear a room, it counts as 1 surge even if you don't answer it. Izuku nodded. I didn't answer it, he said. More to himself than to them. Good, Shinya said. Recovery ritual? The 12th of December 12. Salt, water, protein, Izuku recited. Name the save before sleep. No screens. Leaf on the foray. EAD because it makes me look ridiculous and calms me anyway. Saya handed him a little packet. salted peanuts and a drawstring eye mask. Fashion is optional. He accepted both like medals. Last, Shinya said, gentler. If the temple ache arrives, the one under the eyes, you call me. You don't power through. I'd rather have you annoying me on the phone than clever and unconscious on a floor. I can do annoying, Izuku said. And Saya actually laughed. On the way out, he stopped by the mural photo pinned above the chalkboard. Ringed eyes under a storm, the caption burned. He didn't stare. He nodded at the ancestors and left. Suyu's internship at Sea Rescue ran river drills in the morning. Kids in neon float vests learning how to fall into water on purpose without making the water mad. Zuku met her on the embankment with a thermos and the kind of smile you only get when nothing needs you to bleed for it. Ribbit, eyes okay? She asked, reading him the way rivers read sky. Okay, he said. They wanted a concert last night. I played them a lullaby instead. She accepted that answer with a small nod. Good, help me teach a kid to float. The boy's name was Haru. He looked at the river like it had a mouth. Water did, in a way, but today its teeth were hidden. Suyu crouched so they were eye to eye and explained the ritual. Ribbit, arms like a starfish. Breath slow, water holds you if you don't fight it. Izuku stepped into the shallows, set his palm flat just below the surface. He tilted the water a whisper, smoothing a patch like a bed you just made. Haru didn't need to know that. He needed to know his body wouldn't sink if he told it a kinder story. They counted. 1, 2, 3. Haru lay back and the river held him, awkwardly at first, then with a little pride. The boy stared at sky and did the math of belief in his chest. I'm not drowning. Suyu's eyes warmed without changing. Ribbit, good shape, she told Haru. You made the water choose you. Izuku didn't pull anybody. He didn't push. He moved the world half a fingernail and let a kid own his victory. It was the kind of save you don't write on a wall. He wrote it anyway in his head. After, they at on the embankment and shared the thermos. Ducks invented problems and solved them 3 seconds later. Izuku's head felt clear like paper that hadn't been over-erased. Ribbit, this is the work, Suyu said, watching the ducks scold a leaf. No villains, just making fear useful. He bumped her shoulder gently. You're very good at being boring in the best way. Ribbit, high praise. Back at UA, Aizawa declared a pop exercise and didn't apologize. On the board, you can't be everywhere. Underneath, in chalk that only almost looked like President Mike's handwriting, delegate. Trust, remove yourself on purpose. He divided 1A into 3 mini-squads and handed each a different emergency scenario. Chemical spill. Crowd at a blocked exit. A stalled elevator with a student pretending to hyperventilate with ecstatic realism. Izuku's squad got the exit. The old him would have tried to be a hinge and a lever and a roof in one body. Today's him did something harder. Kirishima, he said, your point on human traffic. You're good at being steady and obvious. Momo, build us 3 wedge chalks and a door brace. Jiro, I want your ears on the mezzanine. Tell Kirishima where the pressure builds before it does. I'll walk the edges. Air wedges and ice pads if needed. But only if it hides behind your work. Kirishima grinned. Manly door bracing. I'm in. Momo already had the material list in her eyes. Pine brace with a rubber foot? 2 wedges at 20 degrees? Perfect, Izuku said. He stayed on the perimeter and did the quiet things. Smoothed a step where an old woman's heel would catch. Salted a tile to keep a stroller's wheel from skittering. Laid a barely there ramp at the landing so the crowd's momentum turned the corner instead of ramming the jam. He didn't touch the door. He didn't bark orders. He let the system do the work because that's what systems are for when you build them right. Aizawa drifted through, pretending not to watch. His scarf didn't move. His eyes did that complicated small thing of his again. The elevator team solved their panic with a metronome app and Mina's stand-up comedy. The chemical spill team solved theirs by convincing Zero that duct tape counts as science if you really, truly believe. Aizawa called time. Midoriya, he said, not looking at him. Describe what you didn't do. I didn't become the door, Izuku said. I let the door be the door. Aizawa's mouth twitched. It might have been a smile. It might have been a fault line healing. Good, don't make me write that on a poster. Bakugo scoffed and muttered something about posters being for losers. Izuku didn't bite. He didn't need to, not when the class moved like a body that was learning how not to break its own bones. Relic 9 didn't send rooms for a week. They sent polite people. Uraraka found a flyer in her locker. Future Heroes Scholarship, a tidy logo, a QR code, 0 typos, and a construction family relief grant section written in language that almost knew her mother's curriculum vitae. The attached keychain charm was a little ring of glass with concentric etches, cute, harmless, focus bead, stamped on the back. She showed it to Izuku at lunch because he showed him things that made her uneasy. This feels targeted, she said. It is, he said, and didn't let the field rise. He took out his phone on the table where everyone could see and texted DGE shot a camera click and a single word, bait. Suyu, across the table, watched the charm like a scientist watching a flower decide. Ribbit, hungry? Hungry, Izuku said. Echo toy, looks safe until it's not. Uraraka's mouth tightened. I could use a scholarship, she said, honest and furious at once. I want you to have 10, Izuku said. Just not from a room that wants names more than it wants students. She held his eyes, then nodded, businesslike, and dropped the charm into a clear bag Momo produced without being asked. We'll find a real scholarship, Momo said, already typing WITH the speed of 1,000 search engines. Edge Shot's reply came back fast. Good catch. Courier intercepted outside. Throw that bag in the sun, literally. They took it to the courtyard and held it under noon. The little ring didn't smoke. It didn't whisper. It just looked. Izuku didn't. Aizawa drifted by. All accident. His scarf twitched. Locker charms, he said blandly. New low. Ribbit. Same as old low, Suyu said. Just shinier. Correct, Aizawa said. He looked at Uraraka, at the stubborn set of her mouth, and added, we'll do a real scholarship list after class. Then, as he began to walk away, he tacked on. Also, if anyone else got one and is pretending they didn't, now is a wonderful time to bring it to me. 3 other kids looked immediately guilty. 2 more turned over, their palms and revealed nothing but skin. Izuku's chest unknotted by a centimeter. Relic 9 had switched tactics from rooms to people. That made sense. People were easier to tilt. He could meet that. He had a class that talked to each other when it mattered. He had a teacher who knew where to put silence. He had a needle and a sun that watched the angles he missed. That night, he did the 12th of December 12 anyway, even though the static stayed gone. He put the leaf on his forehead and let himself look ridiculous. He named the day's saves in his head. Kid in a river. Door stayed a door. Charm became a rock, and slept like someone who had work to do tomorrow and enough discipline to get there with himself intact. A city learns your name before you say it. On Hero Appreciation Day the avenues were braided with ribbons. The smallest kids wore cardboard capes, and utility cranes lifted banners that said be kind loudly. 1A had cleanup duty and the nicer job of waving at toddlers who saluted like cadets. Izuku stocked traffic cones and trash bags, happy to be boring. The field behind his eyes sat at idle like a polite guest in good shoes. Aizawa watched from a stoop with a paper cup of tea, and a face that declared him allergic to parades. Edge Shot's presence was a rumor threaded through awnings. The first mistake was human. A crane operator got a phone call at the wrong time. The second was physics. One locking pin didn't. The banner frame swung, kissed a streetlight, and turned into a scythe. A fabric wave concealed the bad angle until it wasn't fabric anymore. 2 kids on a van. Door cart looked up into a geometry they couldn't read. Izuku didn't think. Pull to save. His eyes opened like dusk. Violet rings stacking into quiet thunder. Here, the children snapped off the cart as if the air were a hand. Bodies skimming the ground and landing against Izuku's chest with a shocked oof. Momentum finished itself in his knees. He pivoted, planted, and the rings wanted another command. Move the world, not people. He lifted his palm and tilted the street by a breath, turned the banner frames fall into a slide along a grit-salted curb, and fed the last of its sulk into AR. Out of cones he'd lined up like chess pawns. The frame clanged, ugly but not ruinous. Silence lasted a beat, then the crowd remembered lungs. Kids cried because kids cry when the future doesn't happen. Adults laughed because laughter is a lid. Aizawa's scarf rose and then relaxed. Edge Shot didn't appear, which is how you know he was already everywhere he needed to be. Someone's phone had been pointed in the wrong direction at the wrong time. The clip was clean. 2 small bodies pulled in a violet flicker. A falling thing deciding it had better places to be. By sundown the city had a new phrase. Violet kid. He didn't go home. He followed Aizawa to a room with cheap lights and too many chairs. UA's press space smelled like coffee and questions. Nezu sat like a riddle solved itself eventually. All Might stood behind him with the smile of a house you can sleep in during a storm. Edge Shot leaned near the back wall. More posture than person. Aizawa went first. A student. Employed a trained emergency technique to prevent injuries, he said, tone flat enough to iron sheets. He did not break property to do it. He did not endanger bystanders. He did not stage anything. His hair didn't lift. His words did the heavy. A reporter said, "Is it a second quirk?" "No," Aizawa said. "It's a control framework we supervise, designed around minimum force physics. Parallel, not additive. We evaluate it with the same metrics we use for any rescue. Does it save? Does it keep others safe? Does it build trust?" Another voice. "Will you show it again?" For the record, Edge Shot's eyebrow moved a millimeter. "We don't stage rescues," he said. "We stage safety talks." Nezu gestured pleasantly toward Izuku. "If the student would like to speak." Izuku stepped up and felt the field behind his eyes sit. Hands folded, listening. He held the podium the way Shinya had taught him. Not like a railing on a cliff, like a kitchen counter. "I don't use the violet unless someone is about to be hurt," he said. "I prefer to make room instead of making mess. I'll push air to take the teeth off a hit. I'll tilt a surface so momentum spends itself early. If there's time, I'll move the world. If there isn't, I'll pull a person, and then I turn it off." A reporter. "Rules? Limits? I get 3 heavy saves in 90 minutes before I'm unreliable. Smaller corrections I can do longer. If I feel the white static nibble behind my eyes, I stop. If a save is bait, I call for backup. If it's a choice between a clean video and a clean landing, I choose the landing." Someone tried. "What are those eyes called?" With the eagerness of a person who collects names like coins. Aizawa's scarf lifted a hair. "We call them none of your business," he said mildly, and the room laughed, which was the safe outcome. Nezu added, "Names can be a public good or a door to private harm. We're choosing good." They ended the conference before anyone could invent a better question. Outside, All Might touched Izuku's shoulder just once. "You used a storm to carry a feather," he murmured, pride warm and not hungry. "That's harder than punching." Edge Shot met Izuku in the hall and spoke without preamble. "2 botnets started seeding the lens rumor the moment your eyes trended," he said. "They'll want to make you into a symbol they can sell to each other." His gaze didn't blink. "Symbols don't get to rest. People do. Be a person." "I can do that," Izuku said, and believed himself. Class 1A had watched the clip together in a lounge that suddenly felt too small. When he walked in, it went very quiet and then very loud in the exact mix he could stand. Uraraka launched a plastic cup at his head. He caught it with both hands because Violet was idle and cups don't deserve storms. "You were so calm," she squeaked, then added, businesslike, "I still have the scholarship list from Aizawa. I'm applying to 3. "Good," he said. Todoroki appeared at his shoulder like weather. "Clean," he observed, eyes on the angle where the banner frame had spent itself. "You didn't grandstand." "I was busy," Izuku said. Bakugo scowled because scowling is a language. "Enjoy your nickname," he growled. "I'll blow it off you. Try me in training," Izuku said pleasantly, and Bakugo's mouth did something almost like a smile before rejecting the entire emotion as fraudulent. Suyu didn't say anything for a beat. She stood beside him in the door like a post to bridge trusts. Then, "Ribbit, your eyes were very polite." He huffed a laugh. "I told them to be. Good. Keep telling. Hey ate curry like kids who had homework. Cameras burned themselves out online. The clip learned how to get old." That night, in the small quiet where worry usually stowed its luggage, Izuku put a leaf on his forehead and breathed. No static. The violet sat on the radiator of his skull and purred once without asking for anything. He dreamed a reasonable dream. A hallway with light bulbs that didn't hum. A door that opened the normal way. Shinya sitting on a step telling a story too old to belong to a city and too practical not to. "When my grandmother said the ringed eyes show up when a family forgets it ever had them." Shinya said, "I asked her what they wanted. She said, to be useful without being worshipped." In the morning, Izuku wrote that down, not as a rule. More like a label on a drawer where he could keep the day. Relic 9 tried anyway. Anonymous accounts posted diagrams of circles and whispers about lenses and thrones. A blog no one read 3 months ago published a histo. Rai of ringed eyes that got details right by accident and wrong on purpose. The archivist's face didn't surface, but his handwriting had started to show up in other people's mouths. Needle and Sun worked the angles. Snipes people seized a warehouse full of perfectly legal glass with perfectly illegal notes etched in the margins. Edge Shot let a rumor burn itself down by not blowing on it. Aizawa made a new classroom poster. Handwritten, taped crooked. Make room, leave them standing. Public not equals to performance. Someone snapped a photo and posted it. It got fewer likes than the clip with the kids. That was fine. Posters aren't meant to trend. They're meant to be there when you need to look at the wall. On the third day after the parade save, a man in a spotless suit, coincidental. Lee ended up beside Izuku at a crosswalk and said, without looking, "There's a room where your eyes would be understood." Izuku didn't even turn. "There's a cafeteria where you could buy your own lunch," he said. And crossed on the walk signal with both feet on the ground. The city, learning his name, also learned his refusal to be bait. The clip became a memory. The kids on the cart became a Thank you card drawn in markers that bled through the paper. He pinned it above his desk where the leaf sat. He went to bed early without apologizing to anyone for being tired. Relic 9 finally sent a person instead of a room. They called him Vector, though his file name was 10 syllables longer and full of universities that had quietly revoked him. His quirk inverted fields, pressure became vacuum, pull became shove. Up became a very rude down. He wore ordinary shoes and a smile that hated corners. Edge Shot picked him up first. 3 sightings in 3 nights near sites that hummed. Electrical substations, a tram junction. The scaffolds around a new broadcast tower. He's testing edges, Shinya said. Thread poised over a city map like a surgeon's hand over a rib. He wants to flip the room and use your eyes to hold it. Then I won't, Izuku said, and meant it. Idle, he told the Violet. It sat. They found Vector at midnight on the tower's service deck, wind pushing at the rails, city lights laid out like coins. He stood with his palm on a guy wire, as if feeling a pulse. There you are, he said without turning, a voice tuned for microphones. The boy who pulls. Edge Shot arrived between syllables. A line becoming a man. Step away from the wire. Vector smiled. What if I don't? He didn't gesture. The air did. Pressure in the deck popped and inverted. The breeze that had been a hand at their backs became a hand at their chests. The tower sighed in a new direction. Izuku didn't throw a push into that mouth. He moved sideways, set low ribs of ice along the deck, and choring with salt so his feet had honest to answer to. Vector tipped again. Shinya rode the tilt like a silk thread, posture unchanged, and cut the distance to 2 paces. I don't want to hurt anyone, Vector said, and sounded like a man who meant but I would like to rearrange them. He flicked his fingers. An invisible shove rolled the length of the deck, trying to make knees untrue, trying to make a rescue expensive. Izuku answered with structure, not force. He built a lattice. Wafer-thin ice braces between rail posts, no thicker than his thumb. Little triangles stiff enough to turn shoves into nothing more than hum. Inversion flips vectors, not trusses. The deck stopped complaining. Vector's eyes sharpened. Clever. Edge Shot moved. Needle fast flick for the wrist. Vector inverted Loka. L space and Shinya's hand went wide by an inch. The next second belonged to the kind of chess that looks like nothing. Shinya's body becoming ribbon and finding seams. Vector sliding pressure pivots under his own feet. Izuku laying micro-ramps where the inversion couldn't eat them because they were not forces, just angles. Pull for me, Vector said suddenly, and the way he said for me made the deck colder. He inverted the guy wire's tension. The steel sang wrong, gutters and gullies redistributing stress. A bolt complained like an old man's knee. The Violet stood up behind Izuku's eyes, hands open. Pull to save. He didn't touch it yet. He spent the inversion instead. He salted the base plate and grew a honeycomb under it. A bed that would give instead of fight if the wire snapped. He tilted the deck's plane away from the most dangerous line so anything that fell would want the empty aisle and not the alley below. He laid a catch rail of ice on a downward diagonal to spend falling into a slide. Vector tried to flip the whole tableau. The inversion caught the air and Izuku let it, because air was supposed to go where wind went. But when the shove reached the ice truss, it met geometry, not argument. And became tired on contact. You keep refusing to fight me, Vector said, the first thread of irritation in the voice. Cowardice, or control freak? Rescue, Izuku said simply. Shinya struck then, not for the wrist or the throat but for balance. He threaded himself between Vector's jacket seam in the night, unfolding with a twist that put 2 fingers exactly where the spine meets the thought to step. Vector inverted. Of course he did. But Shinya had already changed layers, becoming a line across the deck that tied 2 rail posts and made Vector's next step cost him half a choice. Izuku used the coin he just bought. He planted a spindle of ice at Vector's heel, the size of a chess pawn, nothing more, and tilted the deck a breath. Vector's foot landed, found the spindle, and asked his knee the wrong question. His center hung. Now, Izuku said to the violet, just once. The rings opened like dusk. Pull to save, but not the man. The man's sleeve. He gave a pulley, tug that translated less like force and more like invitation. Enough to guide Vector's fall into the lattice he'd built rather than through it. Edge shot was already there, shawling wrists with blue nylon that tightened like regret. Aizawa's scarf ghosted into the wind from a catwalk above. He'd been waiting for the howl only he could hear. The moment to erase a quirk without erasing a person. His hair rose. Vector's quirk fell silent mid-protest. The Guy Wire's song died away. The bolt settled back into its hole like a tooth choosing not to crack. The city kept being a city. Vector stared up through the lattice at the boy who wouldn't fight him and said, with academic loathing, "You're going to bore the world into safety." "I hope so," Izuku said, honest, and dialed the violet down to idle. The ache maybe wanted to arrive. He gave it water and breath and it postponed its appointment. They walked him out through the service stair, past signs that told ladder jokes, past warning stickers that begged hands to be clean and feet to be sensible. On the roof of the security trailer, Suyu sat in a rain jacket with her radio. She saluted once with 2 fingers. Ribbit, angles held. "Thanks," Izuku said, and meant everything the word can mean. Vector, hands bound, kept talking because some men believe words can reclaim rooms they've already lost. "You'll look one day," he said. "Not because of me, because the world is heavy and you are small." Aizawa did not sigh. "He knows how to say no," he said. "It's one of the requirements for my class." Back at the agency, Saya pinned new threads to the map. Vector's red string crossed archivists. The board looked less like an inevitability, more like a sweater finding the loose yarn that would make it honest again. Shinya Ta, PPED the tower photo with the back of a fingernail. "Inversion hates structure," he said. "Rooms can be taught manners. So can some people. Archivist will send someone new who thinks names matter more than actions." "Then we'll keep doing actions," Izuku said. His voice came out steady. He hadn't noticed when that became normal. "Good," Shinya said. "One more lesson to set." He led Izuku to the training pool. Quiet, glossy, faithful. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just walked out onto the water and stood there like a man on a porch. "My great-grandmother's story had a last line I never told you," he said eventually. "The ringed eyes come when a family forgets it had them. They stay if the bearer remembers the village is bigger than the house." Izuku stepped onto the water beside him. Chakras stitching him to the skin of the pool, ice a whisper inside his soles. The violet sat behind his eyes like a lantern, idle, ready. "I'll remember," he said. Shinya nodded once, the way a needle nods before it bites cloth. "Tomorrow, we write it down." They met at dawn, when the city hadn't put its armor on yet. Edge Shot's mat room was all clean lines and one low table. On it sat 3 things: a shallow tray of water, a thin cedar plaque, and a small carving knife wrapped in linen like a promise. Shinya stood with his hands behind his back, posture easy. "Last story," he said. Izuku listened. "My great-grandmother said the first of ours with ringed eyes wasn't a warlord. He was a bridge stitcher. He walked rivers to set ropes, pushed storms just enough to give boats a mouth of calm, and refused to be called anything he couldn't live with." Shinya's mouth tilted. When crowds tried to name him, he made them repeat what he had done instead of what he was. When he died, 2 things were left: a mended village and a plank with 4 lines cut into it. He touched the cedar plaque with 2 fingers. "We don't pass down the plank. We remake it, so the hands that hold the knife remember why." Izuku bowed, throat tight in a good way. He knelt. The knife felt honest in his palm. The room waited. He tested the blade on the air, then drew the first shallow groove, speaking as he cut, voice steady. "Pull to save. A clean stroke. Push to make room." The cedar accepted the line like it had been waiting for it. "Leave them standing." The third cut felt like a breath that finally found the right shape. He paused. The last line wasn't long. That made it mean more. No bait. A notch you could feel with your thumb. A reminder that didn't need poetry. He set the knife down. The violet sat behind his eyes like a lantern with the wick turned low, idle, warm. Shinya nodded once, the way a needle nods before it bites cloth. Say it, he said. Izuku did. N.O.T. for the room or the teacher, but for the part of himself that would need the words when the future got loud. He said them like a thing you can carry in your mouth without cutting it. Izuku Midoriya. Pull to save, push to make room. Leave them standing, no bait. The water in the tray hadn't rippled since he'd walked in. He touched it now, chakra pouring just enough to fuse calm to surface, and set the plaque to float. It rode there, not sinking, not forgetting. Hang it by your door, Shinya said. Make the threshold honest. Always, Izuku said. He didn't get a quiet day to tuck the plaque away. UA scheduled a tiny ceremony he couldn't reasonably dodge. A safety demonstration for neighborhood schools, something between a pep talk and a tour. Cameras showed up because cameras do that. They asked for a display. He gave them a lesson. He held up a leaf. Kids giggled because kids are made to. 9 dozen little scraps of green went onto 9 dozen little foreheads. He walked THM through leaf balance in a voice that remembered what it was to be scared and small and thrilled. If you can tell your body what to do when nothing's on fire, he said, you'll know how to tell it what to do when something is. A reporter tried, can we see the violet? In a voice that belonged to someone who had never had to choose a hard way in short time. Aizawa, leaning against a pillar with tea, didn't even lift his hair. Public doesn't equal performance, he said mildly, as if the poster had spoken for him. Edge Shot's presence could be felt in the way the shadows near the rafters behaved themselves. Izuku smiled without apology. Today is about you, he told the kids. About how you breathe. My trick is for emergencies. Yours is for every day. He showed one gentle air ramp tee. Oh, make a basketball roll back to a little boy who'd thrown it too far. The cameras got their clip, but the footage looked like a breeze being kind. Good. On his way out, a parent stopped him with a hand on her heart. You pulled those children at the parade, she said softly. Thank you. He bowed the way Shinya had taught him, like a bridge stitcher, not a celebrity. I was there, he said. I'll try to be there again. She nodded, and the thanks set in the right place. Epilogue, small and precise. Suyu met him by the canal that evening with 2 taiyaki still warm in paper. Ribbit. Ceremony looked boring, she said. Which in her language meant you did it right. I weaponized leaf exercises, he said. Absolute menace. They ate watching the water pretend it had never scared anyone. A frog cheeped. Somewhere a drone decided to mind its own business for once. Aizawa stuck a new poster on the classroom wall, tape crooked, handwriting the same. If you can't say the cost, don't pay it. He pointed at Izuku without looking. Quiz later. Bakugo engineered a training day where explosions had to be timed to vent into the wedges Izuku laid. He didn't call it cooperation. Izuku didn't call it a truce. They both left that practice with their elbows less stupid. Todoroki lingered after class, eyes on the cedar plaque Izuku had hung inside his dorm door. He traced the cuts without touching them. Good lines, he said. They fit. They have to, Izuku said. I see them when I leave and when I come home. Edge Shot sent a photo. The old plank from his grandmother's shrine. 4 lines cut by a different hand. Decades ago, soft with touch. Beneath it, a caption. Useful without being worshipped. Snipe texted an address with a checkmark emoji. Another cache. Glass that would. Learn how to be windows again instead of mouths. Relic 9 didn't stop wanting. They did stop winning. Rooms learned manners. People did or didn't. That was older work, and not all of it his. That night, Izuku set the cedar by his door. He put the leaf on his forehead and laughed because it still looked ridiculous. He named the day's saves. Kids learned to breathe. A basketball remembered its owner. A promise got written where I have to see it. He went to sleep before midnight because he was a person, not a symbol, and people have to wake up early to keep a city from tripping on its own shoelaces. In the dark, the violet sat quiet as a cat on a radiator, warm, present, not in charge. He said the oath once, out loud, to hear it settle into the room. Pull to save, push to make room, leave them standing. No, thanks for watching guys.